3, 2, 1. And here we go again. And Mike the Vegan is my guest today. Now, I'm going to assume that most people that are watching know who you are. So without giving sort of a huge intro, you are just sort of this prolific YouTuber and you do this amazing work. And we've been friends for a couple years now. Mm-hmm. And I have to say that it's always interesting to talk to you in person because the vast majority of sort of talking and knowledge and conversation I've had from you comes from your videos on YouTube. And even when I get a text from you, it's always kind of funny because it's like, he's like talking back to me. And,
yeah.
It's always kind of funny. So, but just why don't you tell the viewers just a little bit if they happen to not know a little bit about you, and we'll start there.
Well, first of all, thanks for having me.
Yeah.
And second of all, I have basically what I consider to be a vegan science channel, which I mostly focus on health, but I also focus on environmental stuff and animal stuff. And I try to cite everything that I say and have the resources, the links in the description, and kind of have a super high caliber of evidence, which doesn't normally exist on YouTube. And I will say it's funny that you said that about me texting, because there's a lot of people who are like, I watch you and we're friends, but I feel like we hang out when I watch your videos, but I'm not hanging out with them too. So I'm like, what is this? So like, oh, I feel like I just saw you. And so that's kind of annoying in my opinion, but it's cool.
I mean, so this is going to sound funny probably, but you are by far my most famous friend. Like if I would say that.
Well,
I mean,
I'm V-list. That's the joke. It's
V-list.
like A, B, C, D, all the way down vegan list.
Right. I mean, you were on the top 100 most influential vegans. How long ago was that article? I know I read it, but
in the last year. I think it was about a year ago. Yeah, okay. It was just plant-based news. My friends too. So
that was that was cool. But it's something that I think is interesting in this culture. We don't have royalty in America, and I've always thought that celebrities, no matter how sort of big they are, right, they sort of play this role. And I mean, do you get recognized when you go places? Do people, you already mentioned it, kind of feel like they know who you are already? Like, what's that like?
Yeah, I think I'm in a sweet spot where I'm definitely not famous by mainstream standards, but I'm famous among a certain group of people enough that I do get spotted. So like some random ones was like I was at a Omaha Chipotle in like Omaha, Nebraska, and I got spotted. A lot of times health food stores, obviously the vegan festivals, they don't really count. But like one time just like walking down the street in San Francisco, someone shouted at me, and it happens like in bigger cities, especially where there's like younger people around, especially in California, because that's like a third of my viewers, I feel like. Sure. So it happens, and it's good to not like get a big head about it.
Is that weird at all?
I mean, honestly, everybody I've met has been really cool. I mean, there's been like one or two people that are it's kind of interesting situation, but in general, it's always an awesome person and usually leads to an awesome conversation or just like a fun moment. So I'm definitely happy about it. I mean, I'm not complaining.
Do you ever get weird sort of hater interactions in real life? Because we're going to talk about social media and online in a second, but ever have anyone be really weird to you in person?
The closest I had to that was probably when I was hosting a panel. There was this dude who was like a fruitarian, and he had commented. He made a video response to my video. It was like Mike, the misguided vegan. I can't remember what it is. Yeah, because I made a video about how I think we're like more adapted to eating starch than we are to fruit. And that really triggered him because he's like fruitarian. We are frugivores, all this stuff. And so I was hosting a panel, and he just walks up mid-panel when we start talking about the starch topic, and he just starts shouting like, "You're wrong, blah 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 blah." But I mean, it was fine. I handled it well, and like I even wanted to answer his question, but he like angrily huffed away, ran away, and
he got triggered.
Yeah, he got level 10 triggered, and it was just an intense moment because like, there's like a few hundred people there watching, and then some guy starts like shouting at you. It's like, what do you do? But it was totally fine.
Maybe his glucose was low from all those, all that fast fructose sugar.
Oh man, yeah. I don't know what it was.
So again, we sort of talked about how you've grown up and where you're from and all that we're going to kind of keep on the DL, but at the same time, it's I've often think about that when I see, since you've gotten bigger, and in the time that I've known you in the last couple of years, your channel has grown a lot. You do really good work, but because of that, it makes you a target. So if I put Mike the Vegan into the search channel to see, has he done anything new? Of course, I am subscribed with the bell on there, but every now and then I'll see a response or something. And, in person, I've loved it when we've hung out because you're just this very real kind of humble guy. Does it bother you at all when people put stuff out there or say weird stuff? And I'm going to give you my favorite example. So Sean Baker, the carnivore diet guy.
Little Prick the Vegan.
Little Prick the Vegan.
That spurred my DJ name, DJ Lil Prick. Most people don't know about that.
So I mean, just that video was hysterical, and he just wrote a book. I saw that he just had a book. I think it's just titled Carnivore.
Yeah.
But he just wrote a book, and I mean, so how do you deal with that? Whether it's Twitter or because here's the thing. Here's one of my theories, and I'm taking this a little bit from Joe Rogan, but it seems like if you have a crowd of, this is Rogan's numbers, in 100 people, there's going to be one asshole. So, then in America, you're talking about, there's 300 million people, it's 3 million assholes. But it feels to me like in person, people are less likely to walk up to you on the street and just sort of scream and spew hatred at you. But when you get the anonymity of social media, and I can just type in, my cutie pie 7151. It's like, fuck you, Mike.
Totally
and,
anonymous.
Why don't you suck a pig dick or whatever? I mean, do you just let that roll off of you, or
I've gotten to the point where it doesn't bother me at all. Like when I watched that Sean Baker video, I actually was like laughing. I was rolling on the floor laughing. And so it doesn't bother me at all. I mean, maybe the first like couple videos that I ever posted, like 200 videos ago, I was like taking things a little too seriously. And the anonymity is just a psychological thing. Like you can hide behind the screen and all that stuff. And I do wonder though, tying it back to people recognizing me, I wonder if anybody has ever like been a hater and recognized me and like not said anything. Because sometimes people are like staring at me like, do I know that guy? And I'm like, does this person know my channel? And there's probably somebody out there who's seen me and be like, I hate that guy. I hate that stupid vegan guy. But yeah, so they just don't come up to me. They don't say anything. But if they were in the comments, that same person would probably just like unleash, which is fine. And I also noticed an interesting phenomenon where if I get a really bad hate comment and I respond to it just in like a genuine way, usually people are like, oh my God, like I didn't even like realize you were a real person. Like I actually am a fan of some of your stuff and like blah, blah, blah. That happens a lot. And so it's not gonna happen with everyone. There are people that just like legitimately hate everything about me, but I feel like somehow it's almost like a catharsis. Like people are getting an emotional release by just like, they're annoyed by something about me and then they'll say something mean and then they don't really mean it. Like if they were to meet me in real life, they might even be nice. So it's just like a weird human thing that happens.
Yeah.
I know myself, whenever I go to comment something, I might type something out and then I'll read it and I'll be like, wow, I sound like a real prick there.
Yeah, you got to check yourself.
I'm going to reword this.
Yeah, you got to check yourself.
Well, I actually saw you guys in Fairfield just after the Little Prick the Vegan video, because I made a joke in the restaurant about how I had to save a chair for Little Prick the Vegan, and you guys were both laughing and being like, and I remember thinking to myself, I wondered at that time, and it occurs to me that if you're gonna be in the public eye, whether it's 300,000 followers or millions of people, or you're doing a movie or something like that, there has to probably be some level of thick skin, or you're just never going to make it, because there are so many trolls and people that are just going to find that one thing or multiple things they can just tear you down about.
Yeah, for sure. And it's like, I know, for example, like if I have an interview where I look particularly bad, like I had one with John Venus when I was in Europe on 2 hours of sleep, and I just had like harsh lighting, looked horrible. Like carnivore guys make like a 30-minute response video to how crappy I look, and like it's just kind of crazy. It's like, but I just feel like the YouTuber personality usually requires somebody that can just kind of like bulldoze through that, or somebody that can work through that. And it's definitely easier for dudes than it is for girls too, which I've noticed. Like the comments are harsher and more like physically oriented and judgmental.
Yeah.
One of my friends had a marijuana YouTube channel, and he had like almost 400,000 subs. And if he put on a couple pounds, it was all in the comments.
Yeah, oh, for sure.
If he talked about, if he didn't talk about his wife, it was, oh, what happened with the wife? Did you guys get divorced? Like,
wow.
People are just looking for anything they can.
Yeah.
Oh, he looks like shit. Fuck vegans. Or whatever.
Oh, for sure, that's what happens, and it is pretty funny because sometimes I'll do a cooking video and Lindy will come and taste test it, and people will like get even mad at her just that like I cooked a meal for her without her contributing and like stuff like that. It's just weird that people get mad about like every single thing. Yeah.
When you guys have another channel, so Tiny It Yourself, and you guys building your tiny house and all of that, still a great number of followers, but not nearly as many as your primary channel. I guess I've watched some of those videos. I've never looked at the comments. Do you get a lot of hate on that too?
Not really. Basically none. I mean, sometimes people will be like hypercritical of our appearance. Lindy like doesn't like doing it because sometimes people are like hypercritical of her. But we've also just been posting super periodically on that. I try to post at least once a week on my channel, otherwise I can see my channel die, and like we might get once a month on that channel, and so it's not really happening. Like, okay. I mean, and I stopped editing those videos because I didn't have enough time. I needed to work on the house. I needed to do everything else. And so I have a backlog of filmed videos that who knows when will come out, but they're way behind.
Sure. Tell us a little bit about your background, your schooling, and kind of what made you decide you wanted to be a YouTuber.
Well, I have a bachelor's of science in sustainability, so that was like pretty much a completely different area other than the environmental aspect of, you know, the animal agriculture's impact on the planet and understanding that. But now I'm studying a master's in public health, and that was after I started the YouTube. So I basically just was super paranoid about going vegan for my own health and being really afraid that I was going to miss some weird nutrient or some type of protein. Like I needed to eat a bite of fish every few months, otherwise I was going to die or something. So I did an exorbitant amount of research for myself, being like slightly, I don't even want to say paranoid, but just doing my due diligence above and beyond. And then I started, you know, just having to defend my diet and wanting the highest quality of evidence for that. And so eventually a few people were like, you should start a YouTube channel. And I put it off and I put it off, and then I finally just did it, basically.
Yeah. Yeah. And so there's so much out there, and, you know, sometimes you do response videos and a lot of times you're doing topical videos, but when this tidal wave of noise is coming at you, like what is your process for picking a topic, deciding this is worth researching and shooting a video and all that?
It's so hard, and I never know how people are going to respond. It's funny you mentioned marijuana earlier, because my second most viewed video, I think it's around 1 million views, is on whether or not marijuana is healthy and the research on it. So that's just a funny side thing. But when I am figuring out what to do, usually I'll get 5 or 6 messages about the same thing, like you need to respond to this. And that's what I do most of the time. And I've noticed that only 1 in 4 times that I make a video that I'm personally really interested in, that people actually watch it a lot. Usually if I make something that I'm really fascinated in, like, oh, I'm going to run all the numbers on like if the US went on a carnivore diet and like see how horrible it would be. And I find out that like it would double US emissions. It's like, no, actually nobody really cares. Like I thought that was interesting, but they already know, like they already know they don't want to be on that diet or don't like it, or they just are blindly following it and believe everything is going to be great.
Sure. Just before you got here, we were talking about that, about how, you know, with the channel that we've got going, the stuff that you think is going to be really interesting, no one seems to care. And then you look at your numbers, which ours are not like yours, but you look at like the most viewed stuff and you're like, really that one?
I know.
You know, but it's funny. What do you think about YouTube as a platform going forward? Because I don't know that much about tech stuff, but I listen to a variety of experts who will say, oh, you know, they kick so many people off, or Twitter is an example, you know, if you hashtag, you know, learn to code or whatever, you're banned forever. And so, you know, there's going to be, YouTube seems to have a monopoly right now, or at least it's by far the biggest. So, they keep changing the standards or demonetize this and that. I mean, do you think that this platform going forward is going to be where you're going to stay? Do you hear any rumblings that there's might be something else coming up? What do you think?
Well, in terms of other things, people are always like, oh, you should do Twitch, you should live stream to some type of extent, or do a podcast. And I'm like, no, I'm good for now on YouTube. But it is for a lot of people who are starting out, especially now, it's way harder to start out on YouTube than it was when I started out. I think you just breaking that first 10,000 subscribers from nothing is really difficult. It took me a year back then, and it probably, I mean, you can either hit the right things and go right up there, but I think the same person, if they were to start the same channel now, they would have a harder time than they would like 4 years ago. But I really like YouTube. It can be a bit of a hellscape for being advertiser friendly. Like I randomly have things demonetized. Like my recent Eric Berg video, he's a dude who's like a low carb guy responding. He's a video about how he ate 4 or 5 eggs a day. Like that was randomly demonetized, not advertiser friendly. And then I had to get manual review, and then it was okay. And it's like you just bit away, like just demonetize it for like 80% of the views that it's going to have. And it's like, I might have, like, from a financial support situation or perspective where, you know, whether I can go forward or not on this, like that can, you know, it's like you went to work and you didn't get paid that day, sort of. But it all works together into, you know, your whole channel, all your channel views. And someone watches the video you just posted, they go and watch the rest of your videos a lot of times. So it works together. But it's annoying. Like my marijuana video, that one took me like a lot of actually experimenting to see how I could get it monetized. Because after a certain point, once you get to a certain amount of subscribers, I wish everyone could do this, you can actually post as unlisted, and then it will tell you whether or not it's advertiser friendly.
Oh.
And that taught me a lot. I did like a bunch of trial and error in there, and like things.
Shit, I wish my buddy would have known about that, because they yanked his channel down.
Oh, well, yeah he would have maybe known. Well, I mean, he probably got strikes, right? So there's not being advertiser friendly, which will tell you, but I don't think it will tell you whether or not you're going to get a copyright strike.
He got yanked out of the blue like a year and a half or 2 years ago, which was really weird because there were other channels doing the exact same type of content that were way bigger that were just like thriving, and he gets yanked out of nowhere, and they told him like, well, pot's illegal federally, so your content is not friendly. Not addressing any of the other channels.
Got it. So he was like smoking on that, and that's why they took it down, because he was nutty?
Yeah, but
he'd been smoking the whole time I'd ever seen it, like when I first was friends with him. So I don't know what changed though.
I don't know, and that's like I think YouTube are a bunch of assholes, but they have a monopoly, and like if you're in a sensitive or edgy niche, you're subject to the man just cutting your income off.
I've heard people talk about adpocalypse, and I'm not sure of the timing of that. Were you on YouTube when adpocalypse
I was,
happened?
but I did everything I could to not have it affect me. I didn't, swear a lot. I didn't use. I just didn't talk about things that would be demonetized enough. And so I had, I think, one video demonetized from that, maybe in and around there. So like 99% of my videos are still monetized, which is great. The marijuana one, just like I said, I was doing the trial and error, but you probably wouldn't get, like, if they're going to take your channel down based on the subject matter, like they're not going to tell you that in an unlisted video. It's just whether or not it's advertiser friendly. So I found even things like in the title, like if you have marijuana or for example, a tag that they don't like, a tag that advertisers don't like ISIS. That's how I learned the first one. There was a joke where Furious Pete said that vegans are like ISIS lately, and I hashtagged ISIS in my response to that.
No.
Worst idea ever. Yeah. In fact, I'm pretty sure if you go back to his original video, it actually doesn't say ISIS anymore. I couldn't find it. It's like, because you can now clip out like little things, so I think he actually just clipped that out. I could be wrong about that, but
you might be on a no-fly list, man.
No, I think I'm fine. I think it was just YouTube being like, nope, this automated, taken down. And so even in the title of the video, like if you like put a swear word as like a joke in the title of a video, like it might demonetize your video. At least that's something that I thought I was picking up on. It's kind of hard to tell. And then just tags, even description, like talking about death sometimes can be demonetized. So I'm pretty sure in certain situations I've had videos demonetized for saying like, quoting like a death-based statistic with like the wrong words.
It's kind of bullshit that there's no firm rule book. You can't just go look at a list of rules and go, okay, this is clear and I understand it. I know what I can and can't do. It's just there's some standards that like now you're a vegan science channel.
Yeah.
And you have to experiment with like what's going to be safe and not safe. Like you're in, you're in a pretty safe, comfortable niche.
Right.
But even you have to, be really careful about what hashtags to use and how to play the chess game,
It also seems like something that you should be allowed to edit. I mean, so if they don't like the title because it's misleading, there's another vegan YouTuber. He hasn't posted a lot lately, but we met him when we were in Florida for the vegan bodybuilding championship last year. His name is Jeff Morgan. His channel is Guilt Free TV, and I know that he had a thing about, because I saw it come in and then it was off and then it was back. Because the title had something to do with like vegans have the best sex, or the best sex is vegan, or something like that. And I mean, and then all of a sudden it was down and back up with the same thumbnail, the same video. Because I managed to see it before it got taken down.
He probably took it unlisted, and then he probably changed the title and thought, okay, that's okay. But it's hard because I think you only have a limited amount of chances for manual review. Like it only be once, and so you have one shot to fix that video and try and get it. And if they don't like it, then good luck. It's probably never going to be monetized again.
Yeah, I feel like the other thing that I hear from people, and I don't like this sort of thought when it comes to anything really in the world. I guess that's it's kind of a broad statement, but they go, don't even try to do that. It's completely saturated. Why would you even whatever? Like you mentioned, it was easier kind of when you got started. But if somebody, wanted to be a YouTuber, I actually have kids in the office tell me all the time that their career goal is to be a YouTuber.
I have people tell me all the time.
Would you direct them away from that? I mean, do you think it's still something that can be done, or are they right? Is it totally saturated?
No, it definitely can still be done. I mean, I see new channels pop up all the time and do really well. It's just a little bit harder, and you have to maybe be a little bit more savvy, or you have to get lucky and like pick up on some type of like cultural phenomenon, or just people that are super good looking and in like an age sweet spot can just immediately get 100,000 subscribers in like a week.
Yeah. That would be nice. Yeah. And so you mentioned, if you sort of get something that's topical, and I, one of the things that whenever I talk about you or you and I are talking, I always try to not throw in the phrase, I know you have a video about 100 times.
But I probably do.
But I know you have a video about this.
Yeah.
I want to talk about Game Changers for a second. And I actually want to talk about Game Changers and all of the sort of plant-based documentaries in general, because you just put out a video about it. It's really hot right now.
Making another one right now. I'm going to release it in the next couple of days.
Excellent. Well, by the time this airs, that will be out.
Probably,
and I mean, we're definitely going to link your channel down below in the description, and we'll link some of those videos. I did not like Game Changers all that much. Like, I didn't hate it, but I didn't. Everyone's like, "Oh my God, this is so amazing!" Like, I watched it. I thought it was fine. I thought Forks Over Knives was much better. The thing that I wasn't following the plant-based shtick when Forks Over Knives came out. So this is interesting for me because they had big stars in it, and then the like diarrhea of hate that has just poured forth from everybody. It just seems like, it's like, oh, it's all anecdotes. There's no science. It's all just, people trying to get everybody to go vegan. There's this just crap. And I mean, just this, every time I log on to Instagram or Twitter, it's just somebody else saying, this is just stupid. I mean, obviously you have a video about it, but what are your takes on Game Changers and other documentaries? Like,
well, if you were to directly compare Forks Over Knives to Game Changers, Forks Over Knives is a more general health video that applies to pretty much everybody, and Game Changers has a focused mission of athletes, and this is why you don't need animal protein kind of angle. And so it doesn't apply to as many people, and then it's extra triggering because, I will say it's a documentary that's meant to make people at least consider going vegan or not be afraid to go vegan, because 80% of dudes think they're bodybuilders, and therefore they think that they need to be slamming down animal protein constantly. But the reality is, if anything was proven by that documentary, or at least people were put forward that are living proof of it, is that you don't need to eat animal protein to be super duper strong. I mean, Patrick Baboumian, super jacked. People I think they should have spotlighted Jahina Malik more in that, because she's been vegan since birth and she's an IFBB pro. I'm not sure what her career is right now. Maybe she's passed all, moved on from that, but that's undeniable. Like, you don't need to have a study to know that somebody can be jacked and have literally no protein in their muscle has come from an animal. And so that's, these main messages of Game Changers are key. And then also just the amount of research that was cited in that documentary compared to pretty much any other documentary that people just take at face value to be true is so much higher. You look at all the citations in the corner as they're going on and on and on. It's there. And I've talked about a lot of that stuff on my channel. But
that was the thing that struck me, is that, these sort of varieties of athletes and bodybuilders and coaches that are, that want that more meat-based thing. There's no science, it's all anecdotes, but I kept thinking, wait, I watched that movie. There were not only, so in some movies like Cowspiracy, at the end, they've got stuff listed in the credits, come to our website, we have a whole list of studies, but this movie put it right on the screen.
On the screen.
So if you actually saw it, unless you think people are just lying to you, they at least attempted to cite a bunch of stuff. I mean, so then, but this outpouring, this backlash, is it just people that are afraid, people that are trying to sell a different lifestyle? Like, what do you think?
Well, the loudest voice against it that I've heard has been like the low carb community, which is standard. Any vegan content that's made, they're going to be triggered by. The one I'm responding to right now is just like low carb doctor, the Swedish dude who just doesn't like the movie, thinks it's wrong in all these ways, and Men's Health wrote about it, and just various people who are either they have a personal bias toward meat consumption, or they're just like, in general, like, the vegans are their adversary. And so when the vegans try and do something, they need to prove them wrong, no matter what it is. And I have yet to see somebody cite 1/10 as much research in a response as that movie has, or almost any research at all. And a lot, like the one that I'm responding to right now, he takes one study that he says was in the movie, though I actually kind of doubt it. I couldn't find it in a quick look, but it's on saturated fat impairing artery function. He has a 45-minute video. He only cites 2 Wikipedia pages on the gladiators and this study, and it's like, how is that okay? And yet it's more than enough that people need. You know, he's a doctor. That's more than enough information for people to be like, Game Changers is completely wrong. It's totally crazy vegan propaganda. Like,
one of the things that I think is interesting, and you know, you're getting your master's in public health, and certainly, you know, I have a science education background, you know, given all the school I did, is that it feels like when people are trying to debunk, they're going to pick whatever they can and extrapolate it to, therefore everything is wrong. One of the reasons I love to hear Dr. Greger talk is that he'll say, okay, here's the problem with the carnivore diet. Blah, 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 blah. Study. The response video is, Dr. Greger said that kale is green. It's really more purple. Everything he said is wrong.
Yeah, it's a straw man.
And it's like, whoa, wait a minute. I mean, in fact, and so you may or may not like that I'm going to talk about this, but so I'm a big fan of Joe Rogan, and you've done several Joe Rogan response videos, and in your last one you said, guys, I'm sorry that I keep doing Joe Rogan response videos. But the thing to me, and I would say this to his face if he would ever, you know, have me on his show, is that it felt to me, even when he did the vegan debate, that he chickened out a little bit, because I mean, Joel Kahn is fine, but Greger is the heavyweight champion of the vegan side, and it feels like he ducks it. And I don't know if he's a comedian, and so part of me, and he'll say this, part of it is he likes to mess with people, but it happens so much that I don't know if it's just because his program is sponsored by somebody or because he's a hunter. I mean,
he has his own biases. Also, I think Butcher Box or whatever pays him. That's like get meat delivered to your door company. But that was, I mean, you could call that a debate. It was also just like a 2-on-1 discussion. And Joel Kahn, I mean, he's great in a lot of ways. He hasn't necessarily done that many of those debates. But somebody like, if you've seen Neil Bernard's debate performance and like whether or not you should eat something with a face, that debate is incredible. Garth Davis has shredded people on live TV, like on the doctors.
With the happy, healthy couple. Yeah.
And then Dr. Greger would obviously, I mean, it'd be really interesting to see. I mean, I haven't actually seen Dr. Greger in a debate, but I think it would be, you know, hands down ridiculous. It would be.
Well, I just think it'd be interesting because one of the, I mean, and I'm not going to lie. I mean, this show is modeled after Rogan because I like Rogan's format. I like the idea of a platform.
He didn't invent the format.
No, I don't understand. But he does it better, I think, in terms of he has the most followers, the most popular podcast, you know, and so forth. I like the idea of the long form, the platform for both sides, and he really prides himself on, he has on conservatives, he has on liberals, he has on this, he has on that. And the thing is, like, Garth Davis, who I adore, is much edgier. And Garth Davis on there would take him to task, I think, a little more, I don't know if it's disrespectfully is the wrong word, but Greger, whenever, I love watching Greger be challenged, because Greger does this wonderful debate tactic where he'll go, oh, okay, so let's accept that premise. Well, let's look at what would that really be. And I mean, so I think it would be a really great conversation. And, you know, maybe Joe's just afraid that his audience would not like to hear that. But the whole point of the show is, you know, he's got on Tulsi Gabbard one week, and he's got an Andrew Yang the next, and he's got on Ben Shapiro after that. And I mean, so it's, I don't really know
he chooses
what they're all afraid of.
He chooses people based off their current cultural popularity or just how much he likes them. Yeah. And so Greger, although he's popular in a certain niche, he's not going to be like, oh, let's have Greger on, you know. He's not going to be like, oh, let's have these other plant-based doctors on. He just happened to choose a plant-based doctor to respond to someone else. And then he's going to have Chris Kresser on, who's an acupuncturist, to debunk the Game Changers, which is funny. And then James Wilkes, who's the guy who created Game Changers, was like, how about you have me on too, so I can defend my movie.
But I think it's tough because, you know, his show is only what he wants it to
be. Yeah, it's his show.
You know, and it's not. I don't think he's out there to like disprove his thoughts and opinions. Yeah. You know, like for as objective as, you know, as objective, that's the right word. Yeah. For as objective as he might seem to be, at the same time, I don't think he's really interested in, you know, really considering the vegan side of things.
Yeah, oh, for sure. Know. There's also presenting.
He would bring out one of those guys.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. There's also a difference between presenting both sides and presenting both sides as equals. You know, he can present both sides and then, you know, have a basically a 2-on-1 discussion with the group that he disagrees with, the plant-based people. You know, it's like, okay.
Right. I guess that again, like, so, and I understand that I don't have his level of fame and money, and I probably never will. But, you know, the whole reason that I kind of started this and titled it the way that it was is that I like to talk to people that think differently from me. So tomorrow we're shooting with a local chiropractor who's a CrossFit coach. He's a big paleo guy.
Yeah.
And he and I have talked about it before. And I actually mentioned him to you once when we were talking, when I was doing the movie, because he kind of said, well, I'm like 65, 70% vegan because I eat a lot of vegetables. And it was sort of like, wait, whoa. I mean, that's
you're a normal person. That's like the normal goal.
Well, and here's the thing. He's in shape. He's a great looking guy. I mean, so he's eating much healthier than the standard American diet. But I mean, I have no problem talking to conservatives, to liberals, to people that see one side or the other, because that to me is how we go forward as a society. We talk to different people. And then if you can't have a conversation about something you disagree with, how firm is your position that you can't have it challenged? It almost goes back to before, we were talking about if people are sort of put hate out there. Hate's a little different. They're being like, Mike the Vegan sucks, as compared to if somebody says, okay, Mike the Vegan in his video said this, here's sort of my take on it, and here's whatever else. I have a feeling you would take that, anybody would take that much better than just ad hominem attacks.
And that's why I start almost all of my videos, like I just said this in the Eric Berg video, I say it in this upcoming video, I was like, I'm not here to attack the person, I'm here to attack their information, or like here to challenge their information, I should say. We'll put my information up against your information and the sources and see what happens, as opposed to just like, headbutting, separating yourselves, and then being in these silos where no one hears each other's opinions, and then they go more extreme the other direction. Pretty soon the paleo people are carnivore and all that stuff.
Yeah. Diet is such an interesting thing because we got none of it in medical school, and any documentary you ever see or an interview with a doctor, they'll say that, and that's absolutely true. And then as I a couple years ago started kind of looking into the research and saying there has to be actual medical science about this, I feel like I wandered into a holy war. And it still continues to surprise me how people get so defensive. Like, I mean, I'm not a religious person. I'm not gonna, ask you to put your religious beliefs if you have any, but like, I get it in a way that people sort of take these things as being holy, but it's like politics, religion, and diet are these things that people they get so defensive about, and I don't really get it. Maybe it's the naive scientist in me that is like, but if the data, not like, well, I ate a burger once and I felt great. That's not science, but if you try to, whether it's there's citations in the movie or whether it's different things, it's just people get so defensive about it. What do you think that is? Where does that come from?
Well, most people have not, A, they haven't really chosen their diet, and B, if they do choose their diet, they're not choosing it based off information or science. Usually they're choosing based off emotion, or basically doing what most people do, which is kind of following the herd mentality of eating what everybody else eats, eating what society eats, eating what has traditionally and culturally just been eaten. And so when you ask people why they eat the way they do, usually they actually have to think about it and come up with actually a post hoc or an after the fact reason for why they eat that, not the initial reason why they actually did start eating that way, which is because my parents told me to eat this way,
right,
and because I was told these things. And so it's different. It's not a front brain thing. It's actually more of like a reptilian brain response, in my opinion. And so when you're challenging their diet, you're actually sort of challenging their family and challenging their culture and challenging them emotionally, which definitely, and I would say it's a little bit different for vegans, but then there's still the emotional aspect, especially because, it's people are harming animals and there's all these other things involved with it. So yeah, diet has been really hard to talk about, and it's getting harder to talk about. Like, people get more triggered all the time. And that's why I think there was a study a couple years ago, which I don't actually agree with the findings in the larger perspective of society, but it was covered by The Guardian recently, Why People Hate Vegans, saying, it claimed, based off surveys, that vegans were more discriminated against than any other group, religious or racial or otherwise, except for drug addicts.
Okay.
Which, that's what they found. It was on paper. I still don't agree with it. Like, if somebody is racist, they're going to immediately see somebody who is black or whatever, ethnicity they're racist against, and immediately judge them. But a vegan, like, you can't do that. You have to find out what their opinion is, unless they're wearing a vegan shirt.
Right.
But I found that really interesting. Like, people are now more triggered by a dietary choice than pretty much anything else. I still believe that's part of it. But again, like, I don't want to put this up against racism because, you know, no vegan has been lynched. Knock on wood. Hopefully it won't happen. Like, it's a totally different scale. But just on paper, like, these are the findings that we can get. Like, that's how much people hate vegans. Like, that blows my mind.
Tied down and forced to eat a hot dog.
Yeah,
you know,
that's the equivalent to lynch.
I mean, I just continually find it to be interesting because it's in a world where, again, to show a bit of my own hand, I think so much leeway is given to religiosity that makes no sense. But it's, well, we couldn't possibly speak against that because it's their religion and we have to respect their beliefs and we have to so forth. You know, it doesn't seem that way. There seem to be these really ensconced, like World War I trench level, you know, diets of like, no, I'm in the paleo camp and I'm going to die on this hill. I don't care how much study you show me or how blocked my arteries are.
Yeah, that's
Kevin Smith was on Rogan not that long ago, and Kevin Smith had a heart attack a couple years ago and went vegan. He's dropped all this weight. And he said in that, the doctor looked at my heart, which I assume he did an angiogram, and he said if he didn't know where the blockage had been, he wouldn't have known he had a heart attack. I texted you when I heard that, you know, because, you know, Esselstyn and my very favorite study, the Esselstyn study, where he has the angiogram before and after, and you can see the recession of the plaque. But I mean, that was a bold statement that even Rogan didn't have anything to say back to. But it's like, no, I'm committed to this. It feels very much to me like, no, I said I was going to follow this, whatever. I'm a Steelers fan, and it doesn't matter that, I don't know. It's just, maybe it's just that tribal thing. I don't know.
And I think that's what does trigger people more. Like, if you come up to somebody as a Hindu and say, hey, stop eating beef because it's against my religion, I don't think you should be eating it, versus a vegan coming up and saying, hey, you should stop eating beef because you can reverse your heart disease potentially if you stop eating more stuff too, and here are the environmental effects, here are these studies. Like, there is a validity to that and an undeniable, information source for that I feel like it's almost more, they feel like they are doing something wrong even more. It's kind of hard phenomenon to describe, but you can be more triggered by that than just somebody's spiritual belief.
Have you ever met somebody that was so out there with their beliefs that even for you, as passionate as you are about the topic, you were kind of like, whoa. And I'm going to start because I have never told you this story. Okay. But I met a person that told me that she was going to break up with her fiance. And I said, okay. And since they had met, she was not vegan when they met. She decided that she was going to be vegan for the environment and for her health and so forth. He ate vegan around her, but when he was out with his friends, maybe he'd have a little thing here or there. But in the house, he was fully vegan. But she found out recently he was still having a little bit of milk in his coffee. And she said, drinking milk is the same as raping a human woman. I can't marry a rapist. I'm going to break up with him. Now, I tried to keep my face, and this is what I said to her, because this is my actual advice to people, which was this. I'm going to use some language you're gonna appreciate given your background. If that is your truth, if you really feel that way, then absolutely you don't want to be married to somebody and have kids with somebody that you would actually think that about. Now, in the back of my head, what I'm thinking is, that's crazy. But that, to me, when people don't like vegans, most people don't like vegans, or they don't pick any other group that's sort of, right-wing evangelicals that say ridiculous things, they tend to pick out these kind of extreme examples, and they go, it becomes a marketing problem. Like the word vegan's like Amway. I mean, people are like, oh my God. So back to you. Have you ever had any that were way out there?
Just vegans that were way too far?
Yeah.
Oh man, yeah. Oh, that's a hard one. I haven't had anything that extreme. I thought you were asking a different question. I was going to tell a differerent story in response.
Well, I want to hear that story.
Might as well segue into was my debate with Tim Sheaf about the Earth being flat.
Oh,
I didn't know you were talking about vegans in particular, and so he was a vegan for a while, and he drank his own pee and fasted for 35 days and all that crazy stuff.
Delicious. By the way, there's no pee in that water.
Okay, good. I was going to say, it's pretty clear, so either they're really hydrated or there's no pee. So he was, world famous parkour dude. And so I was in this house believe it or not, Jeff Nelson's house, Veg Source. Maybe you know who he is. He starts talking about how the earth is flat. And so I ended up debating him on how the earth is flat. And there's actually footage of that somewhere out. Some girl has that out there. And it was just like, it just blew my mind of what you could think, how you can think things. And what it really came down to was that for some reason he thought it was more proof that the earth was created by a god because it was a certain shape. Like that was what it all came down to. And I was trying to go through certain sort of like astrophysical points or astronomical points on him and things like that. And it did not work at all. And so that was really interesting. But I've heard a lot of vegans say some crazy things, and I haven't really seen any examples of something extremely ethical like that. Like I haven't been on the other side of that before. But that's
sure. So I'd like to get your opinion on this. So if there are people who would say, specifically, my caffeine just wore off. Specifically, if you're, all right, let me start again. I feel like there are kind of two sides to the plant-based community. There's the health side, there's the environmental side, and obviously there are many people that sort of follow both. Yeah. There are people, especially on the ethical side, that would say you should go vegan 100% right now and never look back. And then there are people that'll say, well, you can kind of slowly transition and kind of work your way through, and that's okay. And then you'll get people back and forth hating on each other, saying, no, like that's not the way you should do it. You shouldn't be doing. I know I said I wasn't going to say this, but you had a video recently where the people were walking back and forth, and the guy was talking about Meatless Monday, and he goes, we don't have like Don't Rape People Tuesday or something like that. Homophobic free day or whatever. Wednesdays. I actually got into a debate on a podcast with a plant-based doctor who she never published it. I don't think she liked that I was challenging on this, where I kind of said the same thing. I said, working with patients, I think it's, if people are looking to transition and they want to, whether it's for health or for environment, jump right into it, that's fine. But I think it's probably okay. I definitely think it's okay if you want to kind of work your way up. I mean, so as someone who definitely follows both sides of it, what are your thoughts on that?
I am very happy that there isn't some just like, this is exactly what is right in terms of going vegan and being vegan. Like, to me, that would be way more scary. Like, even if the best situation and way of going vegan that I had my stamp of approval on became adopted as this is how you go vegan and this is what everybody thinks, I would be more afraid of that than the current situation where people have sort of an ecosystem of perspectives and beliefs around it, which again, I would rather have, even if there are some people who are completely misunderstanding what it is and in the beginning they eat some oysters or something, and because they're not sentient in their mind and things like that. Like I'd rather have these things happening than everybody being even more dogmatic about it. So that's my view.
Right. Well, and I definitely think that the word dogmatic is the right one, because it's, if it becomes, it has to be this, then, and what would happen is just like with anything else, there'd be splinter groups and so forth. But I do think it's interesting.
And there are splinter groups. Yeah, there's welfarists versus abolitionists and all these things.
I think it's interesting when people, kind of decide they're going to pick a side, and then you've got people fighting amongst each other when there's so much misinformation and sort of things out there that I don't know, better battles to fight than it must be raw or it's not whatever, or it must be this or it absolutely can't be. But then again, do you think there's a slippery slope? Like if people are like, well, I'm just going to have a little bit of this here and there. Do you think that sort of ultimately leads to?
Well, obviously there's a line that's crossed. I mean, a while back there was a debate about like the vegan umbrella, where people were saying like, oh, you can be vegan if you're just trying, and like every once in a while you decide you really want to have like a chicken wing or something, and but that's still vegan because you're pretty much vegan all the time. But I think that's pretty much universally decided to be just a step too far. Like, fine, just call it flexitarianism. Like, just call it something else. Like, it's clearly not veganism if you're like actively, ongoingly deciding to eat animals. And so there are steps that are too far. But
at some point you're just not that. And it's okay to
just don't call yourself
be that. Right. Yeah. Right. I mean, so if you want to call yourself a Christian, but you don't believe in Jesus, you're not a Christian. I mean, you can still be whatever else, but it sort of becomes a thing. And I know you and I talked about this once, which is, for the 10 months that I got ready for the bodybuilding show 2 years ago and shot the movie, I was full vegan, not just whole food, plant-based, full vegan. But then like, I stopped calling myself vegan because I felt like it wasn't. I started calling myself 100% plant-based in my diet because I felt like I was missing missing pieces of it. Like, before I had become vegan, I bought a new car and there's leather in the car. And I felt like a hypocrite. And I remember even asking you once about the belt that I was wearing and so
and
forth.
I took it off and I just whipped you
right,
with it.
Absolutely. But, I don't know. But I feel like, again, that people get stuck into those labels, but then there are things assumed about you. Like if you say you're conservative, people sort of, okay, therefore you believe blah, 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 blah. And so we earlier talked about, like, if you're somebody who's well known in the community, do you ever feel like people come to you for penance almost? Like,
oh, for sure. Yeah. They're looking for like the vegan stamp of approval a lot, all the time. Vegan people I know, non-vegan people I know, like people will just come up to me and be like, but like I just eat dairy and it's just from like smaller farms. That's okay, right? Like, please stamp me with this like vegan stamp of approval. I'm like, I'm sorry, I just can't. Like, you choose your own thing. But in that video we were talking about earlier, which was, do all vegans think the same? They're asked a question and they walk in certain ways. There was a lot of this discussion, and it was interesting because one of the girls was like, oh, well, actually, I think you're still vegan if every once in a while you have an exception because she travels to like the Arctic Circle and doesn't bring her own food for some reason, but ends up eating some animal products and thinks that's okay. And so it's like, it's okay to just not call yourself a vegan. Like, why would you want to call yourself a vegan when you're just actively choosing to go to these places where you eat animal products? Like, it's okay to not call yourself vegan. Just say like you're mostly plant-based or something. Sure. Like, you don't have to. And that's where I come up with the joke, stolen vegan valor. Yeah. Because I don't know if you've seen the YouTube videos of stolen valor where someone will be impersonating like a military person, and then they'll get called out, and then people shout like stolen valor. And so that's like a genre of YouTube videos. And so I see it with the vegan stuff too, is like people want that label. And like even my mom, who's like probably eats vegan like 3/4 of the time, will go around saying she's a vegan. It's like, why are you saying you're vegan? And so it's funny that at one end we have people hating on vegans and everything that vegan stands for, and then we also have people like kind of pushing it a little bit and actually kind of pretending to be full vegans when they aren't vegan, which is, I mean, it's cool. I'm like happy that she wants to be vegan and other people want to be vegan. It's just an interesting phenomenon.
I'll be interested to see as things go forward over the next, I'm just going to pick a number, 10 years, to see what happens in the plant-based world, because right now plant-based is really hot. We've got the Impossible Burger and the Beyond Meat and the Beyond Chicken, and the fast food restaurants are picking up on it. And as somebody who follows the research and has sort of been at the festivals and has been a speaker and been a participant as well and just a viewer, I think all that's great. I remember when I was late high school, early college, when low carb exploded. And back then I didn't know anything, and I followed it for a long time, and my dad, who was a diabetic, was told to do that, and that was a horrible series of advice. But all these products flooded the market. It was low carb everything, because
South Beach diet,
right? Because the manufacturers of fill in the blank, they don't care. They want to sell you a product. So if what will sell is a vegan cheeseburger, they're going to do that. If what's going to sell are low carb potato chips, that's what's going to be out there. And then that flared up for 2 or 3 years, maybe 5. There's still some stuff out there. But I remember my father saying, I'm so lucky to be living during this time, because there's not all this low carb crap that I wouldn't have had 20 years ago if I'd have been diabetic back then. And so then, like, let's say it went from, I'm gonna make up numbers again, but it was five low carb products on every shelf. There were like 500, and then it kind of filtered back down, and now maybe there's 120. So my fear is that right now it's really trendy with all the plant-based stuff, and right now people in the plant-based community are saying, this is amazing, this is incredible. At the Hy-Vee right by my house, I saw they had on an end cap, so on a featured end cap, they had Gardein Thanksgiving roasts, vegan Thanksgiving roasts, and they were on sale, and they were, so look how much protein's in this and all this stuff. And I wonder if there's going to be that sort
pendulum
of
swinging backwards. I actually think about that a lot, and there's 2 reasons I think it won't be, and one brings me to Impossible Foods and the guy, I believe his name is Mark Post, who started Impossible Foods. Maybe I'm getting that wrong. I hope I'm not. But I was listening to an interview on Rich Roll, and he was saying that his goal as a company is to, I think it's by 2035, replace all animal products with something that is better, which I thought was really interesting. Pat Brown. Okay.
Pat Brown. Yeah.
So backing that up, it was Pat Brown of of Impossible Foods. Mark Post, I think, did some of the. He's the one that did the lab-grown meat. Okay. Mixed it up. But the whole point here is that his goal is to make things better, because here's the thing: animal products as they aren't going to get any better. It's still going to be the same animals. Might be able to breed some here or there to change something up. But with these plant-based alternatives going at it from a biochemical angle, you can make it better and better and better. So the Impossible Burger is just going to get better and better. And then I believe there's a point where people are going to actually think it tastes better. And there was a situation where it was like Glenn Beck, who was given one burger and the Impossible Burgers. Yeah. And he was like, this one's real. And it was actually the Impossible Burger. It's like, this one's better. This one tastes more like a hamburger. And so it's going to happen. And or there's another alternative, because all these vegan people can preach everything they want, but probably the most efficient way is to just take animals out of the equation in terms of from an animal rights perspective. And so with lab-grown meat by people like Mark Post, got the name right that time, then you're going to be able to just slowly replace the whole supply of meat, and people aren't even going to think twice about it. I mean, there are people who are scared of it, but in general, people don't really care what they eat. Like, people just go to a restaurant and just get the hamburger or whatever. Like, the things, like, perfect example, a chicken sandwich from Subway is roughly 50% chicken. That patty is roughly 50% chicken, and no one seems to really care. They get their chicken, and that's what they wanted, and everything's fine. They go on. So just slowly replacing, especially those lunch meats and those packaged meats, is going to do it, I think.
Gross.
Yeah, it's
50%.
Well, a lot of the argument for factory farming is that, yeah, it's terrible, but we have to have it because we have to feed the world.
Yep.
And it kind of seems like, like you said, well, it's at a certain point, especially with the way technology is going and these plant-based lab-grown foods, it seems like you're going to be able to make food. You're going to be able to make a lot more food a lot more efficiently in a much smaller lab. Not producing all the methane gas that comes with factory farming and all of the other, horrific things that go on in that industry. It seems like if the argument is, well, we got to feed the world, then give it maybe a decade or two, but at some point we're going to hit a point where it's like way easier to feed the world in a lab than it is on a massive slaughterhouse, I guess.
For sure. And I will say it's a matter of feeding the world in terms of what would feed them or what they want to eat, because as farming is now, we use, I believe it's like 80% of our farmland to grow 15% of the calories from animal products, and we use about half of the lower 48 land, all of it for animal product production. We just throw away all these calories, all of this land, to just give people what they want to eat, not just meeting protein and calorie needs through what would be plant-based sources. So obviously these cell cultured meats and different plant-based products are just way more efficient. I mean, that's just how it works.
Well, like you said, at a certain point, you're not going to be able to know the difference.
Yeah.
A Big Mac is going to taste the same, whether it's the shitty beef that it is right now or the, plant-based lab-grown beef. At a certain point, you're not going to be able to know the difference, which is which.
Yeah, and it could be better. One example that Pat Brown, got it right again this time, was talking about he was talking about the heme iron in meat versus the heme iron that they use. So they have taken soy leg hemoglobin, which is they essentially genetically modified yeast to create that, and a lot of people have problems with that. We don't need to talk about that. But the idea is, he was saying, they could have actually had this yeast create the exact same type of heme iron that the animal has, but that actually oxidizes faster than the heme iron in the soy. So therefore, you get like a better cooking experience, and you can, it doesn't oxidize. So you have potentially more flavor, more of this like well-cooked phenomenon. And another thing, which I haven't talked about at all, is that this also implies that it would be less carcinogenic, because heme iron is one of the reasons the WHO deemed red meat and processed meat class 2 and 1A carcinogens. And if this heme iron in the plants, even though it's not going to be good for you, is actually going to have less of an oxidative effect, because that's what actually leads to the colorectal cancer, is the oxidation and the DNA damage. And so if you can lower that, then you have something that's healthier and something that tastes better, and you can just remove the cholesterol. No one's like, oh, I missed the taste of cholesterol. Like, there's no taste of cholesterol.
Right. To put my doctor hat on for a second, and I don't know who said it originally, but the first person I heard say this, one of my favorite sayings, was Christopher Hitchens, the British journalist and debater. He will often say, unfortunately, he's deceased, and I'm never going to get to see him debate live. It's one of the great regrets of my life, to be honest. We can't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. It's one of the things that he'll talk about. And so when I look at the nutritional information from an Impossible Burger or one of the Beyond things, it may be better. Healthy is not necessarily the phrase I would use, but I feel like it's probably a pretty good place to start. If we're going to start moving that way, that people recognize a hamburger, they recognize a chicken nugget, a meatball. So it can be this analog. But do you think then if we sort of get that going, do we then transition to the more whole food plant-based diet, which is different? So people that follow the whole food plant-based diet are vegans, but not all vegans are whole food plant-based dieters, right? So do you think we sort of move that way health-wise?
I think there are people that are never ever going to do that. Like they don't care about their health. They smoke. Like why would you go crazy about diet if you're doing something like that? But it's a natural shift as people realize they can be healthier or realize they can go in that direction. Then they become like there's people that go vegan just for animal rights, and all of a sudden they are eating more whole foods and they're eating more plants. But I do think it's no doubt in my mind that it's healthier to eat an Impossible Burger than actual beef burger. And then people go, okay, it's healthier. And then they're like, okay, well, maybe I can try this veggie burger now that I'm like, my mind is open to being able to eat a veggie burger. Like I'm not going to expect the same experience, but pretty soon they'll be eating like the Sunshine Burgers that don't have all the processed foods in it and stuff like that.
Sure. And I feel like that's part of what you were saying, which is if the analogs can get better, where a Big Mac tastes like a Big Mac that they have known and loved forever, then it's like, even if it's even marginally healthier, then it's sort of like, I think one of the things, and I'm definitely not the first person to say this, is that the word vegan sometimes will then be associated with, well, therefore it must be healthier the way that organic, so they charge a lot more, and it's organic. And I've heard like Gregor say, it's organic dessert, therefore I can eat all that I want because it's organic dessert.
Well, cigarettes are vegan. Back to cigarettes.
Right.
They are. And I will say, I do think the experience will possibly, because what Lindy's giving me the no on that one. Just saying that was a stupid thing to say. I think cigarettes. What? Sometimes they're vegan. They can have like a beaver butt juice in them.
So don't smoke cigarettes anyway, whether you're vegan or not. That's bad. But
I gained my train of thought again.
Apparently, we from the expert, and I do believe you that
I'm sure some of them do.
Not vegan. So
what I was going to say though was I think possibly the Impossible Burger is going to get to a point where everyone's like, this is exactly the same. And if it doesn't though, we'll have lab grown meat doing that. And it will actually be a little bit healthier because they can just kind of like delete the cholesterol out of the process in that as well. And they can make it slightly lower saturated fat, although people pick up on the taste of saturated fats, they probably wouldn't. And there's just things you can do to make it a little bit healthier, but it still won't be as healthy as eating the plant-based one, in my opinion.
The whole thing about dietary cholesterol is interesting to me because I thought that was put to bed. Our body makes it. If you require dietary cholesterol, vegans would be dropping dead left and right. But yet, back to Rogan. Rogan's one of the loudest people that says, no, you have to have it. Your body can't make enough. We have to sort of whatever. That plus the incomplete protein thing are the two ones that seem to come back around. Whenever I hear it again, I think, did I miss something? Was something new come out, or is this still the old crap?
Well, it always involves ignoring a major piece of the puzzle. Like, for example, why do people need to worry about eating cholesterol? Like, why would you need it? They say, it's hormones. Well, if you look at studies on vegans, they have equivalent free testosterone and higher total testosterone. So clearly they're able to make these hormones without having higher cholesterol. Your body makes as much cholesterol as it needs. That's just how it works. There's no credible organization that I've seen say otherwise. And then protein we can talk about. Right.
Well, I definitely want to come to that. But just before to finish this thought, so let me throw some medical science at anybody who's listening. And this is not my opinion. This is what evolutionary biology puts out there, and not all evolutionary biologists are vegans. If you look at the organism, whether it's the human being or the saber-toothed tiger, there are certain things that the body makes. And there are certain things the body doesn't make, and we tend to refer to the things the body doesn't make as essential. So the essential amino acids, our body doesn't make them, therefore we must acquire them by diet. So as an example, there are many creatures on the planet, mammals included, that make vitamin C. Humans no longer make vitamin C. We probably did at one point.
We did, and then it just kind of broke.
Right, but we don't, which implies very, 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 very strongly that humans were getting sufficient amounts of vitamin C from their diet, eating plants and fruits and vegetables. Therefore, that was able to be selected out. But cholesterol, our body makes it. Therefore, it is by definition not essential. So when somebody argues against it, just the biology 1 class that I took as a freshman kicks in my head, and I think, wait, that's not right.
Yeah, I mean, and I will say there's essential and there's essential to a degree that you make it and then you also need it. Like, I think choline is a good example of that. It wasn't considered an essential nutrient until like the late 90s, I think 1998. And so you can make it. We do make it. We might actually make enough, but we've somewhere along the way decided that actually we also need to eat it. And we can get it from plants too. But now the choline industry and the egg industry and all these people have gone on and paid these researchers to do these
that video
things.
From the dietary guidelines thing, it was choline.
Yeah.
I'm like, Jesus, I've never heard of this. And apparently half the nutritional world thinks I don't get enough of it.
Yeah, it's insane. And then you realize that that woman was paid for by the choline industry to do research.
One of my favorite memes that I ever saw about the whole plant-based thing was there were like 3 or 4 sentences, and the first one was, man, I've had a hard week. I'm going to go out and get drunk this week. And everyone's like, yeah, you go. You deserve it. And the second one's like I'm going to totally hook up with that person. Like, yeah, you go. And the third one's, I'm going to go vegan. They go, oh my God.
Yeah, that's the worst. No, I know. I love it.
No protein, no B12.
That is such an interesting phenomenon, this like vegan sort of triggering people thing, because there are a lot of horrible things that people do all the time. Like, there are probably pedophiles in your community. There are people that are just, I don't know, like beating their children, people smoking, of course, which we know causes cancer and early mortality. And they're just like, I'm just going to leave that alone. I don't really care about that. Then why do people care about people being vegan? Even if they think it's the least healthy thing, and it's because if it does work, then what they're doing is wrong. And that means that they're doing something that's probably a little unethical. Yeah. And it kind of forces people to look at themselves. Because if they didn't have to look at themselves, like, for example, if you're telling people to stop abusing children and you are somebody that abuses children, you're going to be a lot more offended by that person than somebody that has nothing to do with abusing children. Just like some nice preschool teacher or something. It's like, very obviously, it's connected to their own habits.
Right. In all of your travels all over the world, have you ever got to meet Earthling Ed?
Yeah, I met him in the UK. I ate at his restaurant too a couple times, which is cool.
So I love watching Ed, and for any of you listening or watching who, whether you're plant-based or not, Earthling Ed to me is such a wonderful spokesperson because he's very well-spoken, he's very calm. People sort of come at him and he stays really calm under fire. And I think he does a nice job of addressing a lot of the things we've talked about, when the haters kind of come at him, and having this way of, I don't know, just sort of gracefully making his point and not seeming too crazy, even though he looks looks a little hippy dippy, but his stuff is really wonderful.
Yeah, no, he's amazing. He has the perfect way of getting a point across without triggering that thing that we're talking about. But it's still funny though, the playing field that he's on versus who he's talking to is totally different though. And a perfect example, and probably my favorite Earthling Ed moment, was where there was a protest where people were going to buy from this animal auction, and there's some vegans outside, and he starts talking to this guy who's in his car. This guy who's a farmer, who's going to buy stuff, and this guy just rips into Earthling Ed. He whips out every single horrible profanity that you could think of, like the C word, all of the worst, which in my opinion is like the worst word. I think it's probably widely considered to be one of the worst words, over and over again. Bam, 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 bam. Like, I don't know if we're allowed to swear on this, but like F you, all these things over and over again, angry. And Earthling Ed's just like, yeah, like blah, 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 like, okay. And then he's like, finally, Earthling Ed's like, you're pathetic. That's the word he used. This guy jumps out of his car, tries to punch Earthling Ed in the face. The cops had to come and create like a barricade. It's like what he has dealt with versus what he dished is just, the scales are so tipped in the other way. And then the word pathetic was not from a guy who's saying every single swear word that you could possibly think.
Why don't you go try to pull one of the curtains? See how he's got that sun thing across his face. Why don't we just see if we can't pull that curtain? I mean, so I mean, if you can stay that calm under fire, it's a lot like Richard Dawkins when he stays pretty calm, but then at some point you just think you just had enough of people telling you what a moron you are all the time. But one of the things that he said that really struck me, he was on a podcast with the Cosmic Skeptic, and Alex is I don't know what Alex's last name is off the top of my head, but Alex is a student at Oxford, and he was saying Alex has gone vegan for sort of moral. He's a philosophy major at Oxford. He's talking about, so for philosophical reasons, there's no good ethical argument you can make in a world where there's plenty of calories for all to go around that you would have to eat meat. And people, what about an apocalypse? We're not in an apocalypse. And so anyway, one of the things that Earthling Ed said that I thought was so interesting that has really stuck in my head is that Alex asked him something that I'm going to ask you before we're done here, but don't people will ask all the time, do you ever miss meat? Does it smell good? Does it, don't you miss a little bit of it? Because I think people are looking for that little bit of humanity, back to that thing. And what Earthling Ed said, again, very calmly was I don't even think of it as food.
Yeah.
So I don't miss it because I don't even think of it as food. And I thought that's a great way to look at it, because I think a lot of people decide, okay, God damn it, I'm going to do this for my health. No more cheese, no more pizza, no more whatever. And they just like long for it. And it's like, but if you sort of take that on as it's not even food, I have a little kid and watching her grow up until like my wife finally convinced her to eat a hot dog, she'd sort of look at stuff, and she was eating fruits and vegetables, and she kind of look at it and was like, the hell is that? Like, because I don't think as a human it even registered in her brain it was food.
Yeah, I think there's a couple reasons that there's a problem with just saying, oh, you crave this. Like nobody would even consider eating dogs. Like if you took someone's family dog.
Not in this country.
In this country. I'm saying here. If you took somebody's family dog and you, I hate to say this, like skinned them, got rid of the fur, and cooked their meat, it would smell good to people. In fact, if you take people and do the same thing, it smells like bacon. And so that it smells good. So like that's absolutely not a reason to eat something. We just happen to have these receptors that respond to things like cooked calories and stuff like that. So it's just so far from a real reason to feel good about eating.
Rogan would hate that I would use this against him, but one of the things he talks about when he says people shouldn't eat sort of this and that is he calls it mouth pleasure. And he'll say, well, pasta's not great for you, but I mean, we do it every now and then. But basically, we're making these bad decisions that are bad for our health and our bodies for just sheer mouth pleasure. And I often think, that could really be used for a lot of the stuff that you're, when you go out and kill an elk and then, the backstrap is so good. Him and Ted Nugent, that's a podcast that's really interesting if you have plant-based leanings. Well, I mean, Ted Nugent's a little out there anyway, but he and Rogan are talking about how it's the only really good protein, and it's like the best protein and all this stuff. But and I forget who I heard it from the first time. One of the things that kind of blew my mind is that there are no protein receptors on the human tongue, but
there are on a cat and a dog.
Right. Yeah, so when people say, "Well, I couldn't give up steak because I crave the protein," that's what they mean is it's a comfort food, and it's that habit. And
and a lot of people also just mistake protein for fat in what it is. Of like, oh, I need to get my energy from all this meat and this protein. It's like, no, actually, you're just getting 500 calories of fat, and so your body picks up on those calories. Your body isn't like, oh, I need protein for energy, because you use very, very small percentage of your calories are burned as protein. But a decent amount are fat. And we know, the body craves fat. There's a reason the body craves fat evolutionarily. And so I believe a huge portion of people having a hard time giving up things, especially like cheese. Like there's a scale of what are the hardest animal products to give up, and it's a scale of low fat to high fat. Like we're like egg whites. No one's like, oh, I have such a problem giving up egg whites. No, so that's at the bottom, and then it's like, no, I have a problem giving up like these high fat cheddar cheeses that are like super concentrated in pizza and things like that. And it's fat. It's not protein.
Right. And casomorphins, which is a whole. Oh yeah. I think one of my favorite videos of yours is reasons vegans fail, and one of the things that I wanted to get asked for sure before we wrapped up, and I guess we still have a long time, but anyway, is if people listening to this are thinking, I might give this plant-based thing a try, what are some ways that you would recommend they get started?
Right off the bat, I mean, it helps to watch a movie like Forks Over Knives just to get motivated, because if you're already motivated, fine, you can worry about the logistics, but getting motivated I think is good, and just seeing those stories of reversing heart disease and preventing these diseases and just seeing what happens in the body is amazing. But then after that, it's a matter of figuring out like, what are your favorite foods and can they be veganized easily? 90% of it is about whether or not somebody can cook too. It seems like that's usually the main conversation, is like, what do you know how to cook? What can you cook? Do you want to cook? Like what's your deal with that? And if people do like to cook, then it's a matter of handing them certain recipe books. Sure. There's so many good recipe books out there. And then if not, sometimes it's a matter of learning how to eat at certain restaurants. And like we just ate at Panera on the way here, and it'd be cool if they gave you more food, but it's easy. You literally just have to go to, Panera.com. They have a vegan page now, or, download Happy Cow, Or you can just use happycow.net and see all the vegan restaurants and all the reviews all over the world. That's what you use when you travel, or any place, any city in the US too.
Man, that's another thing. My mom has just been going, like, not full Whole Foods plant-based, but like her and my dad have kind of been trying to go, you know, without like killing themselves, without like making radical changes. They've been trying to eat as many like plant-based meals as they can. Every time I go over there, she's making something that's absolutely delicious. We just went to the Veg Fest last weekend up here.
Nice.
Tons of super good food. The thing is, I don't understand, like, there's all this delicious Whole Foods plant-based food that I think anybody would enjoy. None of it is on, like, a fast food menu.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
It's so frustrating.
And until you can pull up in the drive-thru and order something off the menu, which you absolutely should be able to, because these are delicious options. It's not a matter of like, well, the vegan food isn't good enough.
Yep.
Like, the food's delicious. It's just, you know, the convenience factor is such a, you know, just moneymaker in the world of food and business in general, that until McDonald's has a vegan option, you know, that tastes equally as good as the other stuff, you know, it's going to be hard to get some of that stuff to become more mainstream. But in this world of, you know, everybody's preaching about sustainability and, you know, health culture and everything, and it seems like that's making, you know, its way back in, especially as we're learning more about, you know, carcinogens and things like that. It's going to have to start getting posted on fast food boards. Otherwise, it's going to have a really hard time catching on and becoming mainstream, I feel like.
Yeah, this is such a hard thing. And there are restaurants in like LA you can go to, some of them that have like whole food vegan options in some places around the world. But that's like super niche of the niche, which is frustrating, because if you had like a fresh sweet potato lasagna that you could just pull up to a drive-thru and get, like, people would like it. There's a problem though, like in terms of what is basically addicting as food and what is craveable as food as well. You know, all these fast food companies have tweaked the recipes to be what is going to get people there and addicted and back. And it's high salt, it's high fat, the high oil. Oil is the most calorie dense thing. And some of it's also just about like keeping food fresh. Like, they'll douse things in oil. You can spray food. Like, there's an oil-free vegan buffet that they do at an Ethiopian restaurant in LA. And every once in a while, they'll just come with a spray bottle and spray it so things don't go bad. But like, you know, this isn't how the restaurant industry works. You know, if it's Chipotle, if you've ever seen them put the oil on the rice, it's just like, it's cups and cups, and then that keeps things fresh, and it makes it a little bit more craveable and more satisfying when people eat there, because it's more calories. And it's really unfortunate, because if we could just get these options quickly, people could easily go healthy vegan, not just vegan, but super healthy vegan, and get really dramatic results on things like cholesterol and blood sugar and blood pressure.
But your opinion about oil is out there sort of a lot, you know, not just on your channel, but on others. But I think that's another place where there's a lot of misunderstanding, where everyone's heard that coconut oil is so amazing for you, you should eat spoonfuls of it, put it in your coffee. You know, surely olive oil is healthy because Mediterranean this and so forth. And certainly oil is not a health food, is a Mike the Vegan favorite.
Yeah, for sure. And especially with coconut oil, like, it's a scale. Like, butter raises your LDL, at least from a study. I could probably link below this if you want me to. Butter raised LDL, and then coconut oil was a little below that. So it raises LDL, which is bad cholesterol, because it has a super high level of saturated fat. And that's just the reality. And then other ones can create artery impairment just based off other aspects of them. And there's a spectrum, you know, how high omega-6 is it versus omega-3? If you get too high omega-6s, it can lead to inflammation. But then there's oils that aren't as bad, but no matter what oil it is, it's 9 calories per gram. It's the most calorie dense thing that people eat. And so in a world where most people are overweight and they would benefit from losing weight for their health, and they probably want to, oil is not something you want to include in your diet a lot.
Yeah, I think back to your point, what you just said. I mean, even just sort of hearing what Mike just said, I mean, I follow that, the omega-3 or the omega-6, but I can imagine the vast majority of the public's going to go, damn, I got to think about something else. Like, what's
that's like 6 months in, a year in, when you're ready to worry about that stuff, unless you have a severe heart condition. Because that's where I got it from initially, was Dr. Esselstyn.
Right.
He says no oil in his studies.
No oil.
Yeah, no oil is famously shouting. That's because he is of the belief, based off his experience with patients, that he will not get the results, the artery reversal results, with that level of concentrated fat going through your bloodstream. I
think what it would take for it to become mainstream would be, you know, can I roll up to wherever and take it? You know, I mean, what if every restaurant starts having it? You know, you go out with your coworkers and it sort of becomes that. I think, and where they're so right now, let's just say standard American food. I mean, so omnivorous food. With the variety of restaurants, there are ones we all know are healthier than others.
Yeah.
So I feel like if it could be that analog, because I mean, people are, oh my God, it's going to be salad forever. That was the number one thing I got. So 2 years ago, when I changed to whole food plant-based for the movie, I would post about it. And my thing was always how I did it was that I realized that what I really wanted was not the animal product. What I liked was the sauce. And most sauces are vegan. So I went through it in my mind. I really like Mexican food. Well, but what I really like is guacamole and salsa. Well, I can put that on anything. All right, I'm an Italian, red sauce. Well, I can make that deliciously. Okay, so great. Thai peanut sauce, all these sort of, and so once I figured that out, it was sort of made it easier for that, to kind of figure that. But then I would put stuff up there. I'd say, this is what I'm eating. And I would get these just response after response from people going, it just sounds like I got to eat salad all day long. And I actually told you that once. And one of my favorite things you've ever said to me in person is you went, oh yes, the salad argument. I need to eat more salad.
Yeah, that's true. I do need to eat more salad.
Vegan. Yeah. And then we went to lunch. And Lindy, who's off camera right now, we were sitting at the Argiro Center, and you had a little bit of salad in front of you, and Lindy scoffed at your salad, and she was, and I still remember, she went, yeah, I'm looking at you, and she went, we got to color that up, and all of a sudden she's taking stuff off of her plate and like sprinkling this
That's
extra.
The story of my life.
I was watching myself, thinking to myself, this is awesome. Like I wish Mike the Vegan viewers could see. And could see Lindy sort of coloring up his salad on the heels of saying in that conversation, you see, Adam, he wouldn't even be vegan if it weren't for me. So, so there we go.
Oh, for sure. She deserves all the credit.
But I do think that's the view, is that it's going to be no fun. It's going to suck really bad. It's going to be, I give up everything that I love, and it's just going to be salads and beaten kale smoothies forever. And that's why I think things like Impossible, things like some of the pizza places that, even on an omnivorous diet, you shouldn't be eating pizza every day. And on a veganized pizza, no, it's not going to be something that we eat every single day. But I like the idea that those options are just going to be more and more so.
Yeah. I think that it needs to be marketed a little bit better as well. I think that people that are eating a lot of meat or eating a lot of animal products, the idea of even going to an all plant-based restaurant might sound off-putting because they're thinking about, they're not going to have anything that I want, and I've even my mom's invited me to like the Trumpet Blossom. My first thought was like, that sounds like boring, because I know their whole thing is like,
everything's vegan.
Everything's vegan. When it's like, wait. I know vegan food is delicious. Why is that my first knee-jerk reaction? I think, if there was an all plant-based menu, everybody that's not plant-based is going to be like, oh, that's for those people, as opposed to, I should give that a try. I think that it needs to be like marketed more subliminally almost.
And that's why I think like Burger King is great, because people are going there and they're going to a place that they feel totally comfortable in, and they're able to get these options.
Yeah.
And I will say, I wish Trumpet Blossom gave you more food.
Yeah. Oh, dude, I can't even. I'm so glad that you said that, because I've always kind of been a fat guy my whole life, and you're sort of tall and slender, and so when especially when I was bulking for a powerlifting meet, my wife and I would often go on a Tuesday, which they have little tacos. I would order 2 orders because it was just not.
And this is the problem too with a lot of the reason people don't want to go to a fully vegan restaurant is because in the past comes back to the calorie density thing. They've had vegan options which just objectively had less calories. They might be used to be eating 800 calories at a meal, and then all of a sudden they're eating 400 to 500, and they get full because there's so much fiber in or something like that. Their body hasn't adjusted to it. That's a huge issue, and then people get a bad idea of vegan food, or they go and they spend too much money at a vegan place. But traveling around the world, I will say, it's not going to be the people. It's the people that are open to it. But traveling around the world, a lot of these vegan restaurants are just packed all the time.
Nice.
They're the most packed restaurants I see a lot of the times. And
nice.
So.
And what you just said is actually where I was going with my question earlier about reasons that vegans fail, because I think you make a good point in your video, and I think it's absolutely true. People go from eating, 3,000 or 4,000 calories, and they're like I'm gonna eat vegan, and they eat like 3 salads a day, and their calories fall to 1,200 calories a day.
And then they get low energy.
Right, my energy's terrible, and so then
wonder why.
Then they go to hell with it, and they eat a big old steak from Longhorn. And they go, look how much energy I have. I'm a meat guy. Like I've got to have meat and more meat, because when I tried that vegan thing, I just felt like crap.
Yeah, my body must just be designed for more meat. It just shows how manly I am. Like, no, right. But that's why I would say the one thing I forgot with the advice of first going vegan is hopping on something like chronometer.com or some other nutrition tracker, MyFitnessPal, and just learning what foods have what amount of calories, and then just getting an idea, and maybe just doing 2 days on there. Like that's all you have to do, and not to be restricting calories, which is why people usually count, but just to make sure you get enough, because there's people that go vegan, eat 1,200 calories, and are like, how could anybody do this? You know?
Right. And so definitely, and I know you're sort of a fan of Chronometer. I've always liked MyFitnessPal, and I think it's so mind blowing. There was a study done where they showed a variety of people a picture of a large pizza and asked them how many calories they thought were in that, and the average answer was about 800, and it was somewhere between 3,000 and 4,000. And it just shows. I mean, I said this as part of the movie that I did one time just for fun. I went, one of my favorite snacks. I always say this was not the only food I ate that day. When I would watch a game or watch a movies, I would get a box of Wheat Thins, and then that sliced cheese like you put on a sandwich, there'd be on sale like 2 for $5. I would cut those up into little squares, and I would eat all of that. And I remember thinking to myself, that's not good for me. But I mean, it's not that many calories. It's way over 2,000. Yeah. Way over 2,000. And that was not the...
And how much did you weigh at the most?
The heaviest I ever weighed in my entire life was around 300 pounds. At the time I started 2 years ago, when I began doing the movie, it was 262 and something, and all that. And then when I was on stage in Austin, I was in the mid 140s. So
that's way less than I weigh. That's crazy.
Well, I mean, I'm not still that weight. I mean, sort of a variety of things kind of happen, but I mean, the being bodybuilding stage ready is not a way anybody stays at. So, Nimai Delgado, Jahina Malik, when they're shredded for a show, they don't stay at that weight. Now, I'm not saying they go binge afterwards. They may. It's a big thing in the body. But at the same time, like you're not going to build a lot of muscle when you're 4, 5, 6, 7% body fat. So that's why you see pictures of them and they still look good, but they're not looking like every vein in their body. So there's sort of the bulking and cutting phases. But I do think it's interesting. I feel like we're obligated to talk about protein just because it's a vegan conversation. But it still is amazing to me, despite it's much more mainstream now than even it feels like a couple years ago when I first started looking at it. And the first time I ever saw fork serve knives, I was in medical school and had really heard none of that before. But that's always the big thing, right? Like if there is protein, it's subpar protein, it's incomplete protein, even though that was debunked however long ago. And these things just repeat themselves, and it's like a bad case of, I don't know, some kind of a rash that keeps coming back. I look forward to a time that whether it's you or somebody else who's plant-based, we can not talk about protein. But let's, for the sake of argument, let's talk about protein. What are some of your thoughts? What are some of the sources that you think people need to look at? Like, do they even need to?
A few just important things is, again, if you hop on something like Chronometer and you just put in some beans, put in like 2,000 calories of pretty much any mix of plant foods that aren't like heavily refined, like straight sugar or orange juice, you are going to see that protein, all of those essential amino acids go way over 100%. Total protein needs way over 100%. In fact, they were talked about the gladiators in Game of Thrones, or in Game Changers movies. Shows what I'm also a fan of. And they were talking about what they actually ate, and I'm responding to this guy, and it turns out they ate barley and broad beans. And I typed in 2,000 calories of a mix of those, and they were like 170% of the protein, way past everything. Anyway, that point aside, the most mind-blowing figure that I still to this day talk about is this study that compared the free blood protein levels of vegans versus omnivores, people that ate meat, and they were higher in vegans. This is free blood protein. This is what you use to build things in your body. Yeah. Which should just blow everybody's mind. In fact, vegans should be asking where other people get the protein. Obviously, it's a non-issue to that extent. And the reason for that is probably because inflammation manifests with C-reactive protein, which would use up some of that free blood protein. And vegans have about 30% lower levels of inflammation of C-reactive protein. So you have to use less of that. And, people with higher inflammation have lower levels of free blood protein also in other studies. And so it's clear that there's a connection there. So you can eat all that extra protein, but the inflammation from the animal products is going to eat some of it away in terms of how much you can actually use, which I think is really interesting. And then they had a recent study that actually compared animal versus plant protein in adults and muscle mass, and they found no difference. It was just how much you were taking in, not where it was from.
Yeah, and it seems like from a lot of the research that if somebody, for whatever reason, feels the need to eat a higher protein diet, the higher levels of the plant-based protein don't seem to have all the IGF-1 and the TOR, and which is sort of just for people that aren't nerds like me, potentially cancer-causing things, and one of the things that T. Colin Campbell in the China study really showed was that the ability of the animal protein to turn on, some of these cancer genes, and then the plant-based protein to turn them off. It's a wonderful book if anyone listening hasn't ever read it.
Yeah, part of it I think has to do with the exact amino acid ratios. Like anything that's really high leucine, like goes way more over what you need, can trigger that IGF-1, which is a growth factor that plays a role in every stage of cancer growth and spreading. And vegans have lower levels of IGF-1, but not low levels. Whenever I say that, people are like, "Oh yeah, they have low levels." No, they have good levels, and they're lower than people that eat meat. And then so people, also interesting fact, people who have a genetic dwarfism condition called Laron syndrome, where they have low IGF-1, super low, actually don't get cancer. There aren't cases of them dying of cancer, but then people with acromegaly who have too much IGF-1 actually get increased level of cancer. So it's very obvious that you don't want to be boosting this higher than you otherwise would. And animal protein, there was a study on 292 people, including vegans, and they measured the effects of different proteins, and that plant protein brought the IGF-1 down, animal protein brought it up. The same thing with dairy. Dairy actually has IGF-1 in it, and then it also raises it from that protein sort of cascade or whatever. And so it's plant protein's better there.
Yes. You can get plenty of protein, and it's less tricky. One of the things that got thrown at me a lot, and once again, I know I'm not the only one, is that I would get these sort of omnivorous lifters saying to me, well, if you're going to do that, you're just going to have to supplement with all kinds of protein shakes. And my favorite question was, do you supplement with protein shakes? Oh,
that's different.
Oh, yeah, bro. Like 3 or 4 a day.
Yeah.
So you're not getting enough protein eating meat.
I know. That's the part that blows my mind every single time, slamming down the whey protein and then pointing at vegans. Oh my gosh. That's like one of the most cringe things. And no one just ever makes those basic connections. Or some people do, and they go vegan.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I'm a dummy, and I've heard from you a bunch that whey protein is really bad. I grew up with a big old tub of whey protein on top of the refrigerator for my entire life because my dad and my brother are big protein junkies. They like to lift a lot of weights, get a shitload of protein. Can you educate me as to why whey protein is bad?
Well, it's the same thing. I mean, it's the ratio of amino acids in it that would boost that insulin-like growth factor 1. So that's basically cancer. I hate to call it cancer fuel, but it's just not something that you want. It's cancer fuel. Yeah. Like I said, again, people who have genetically low levels don't get cancer. People who have higher levels get higher levels of cancer.
Sure.
Yeah, and so that's in my opinion, the main thing that's going on. There's also could be some different inflammation things that happen, but that's it for me. It's like cancer is now coming up there with number 1 in the U.S. with heart disease. It's literally their neck and neck right now, and so it's for every precaution against heart disease, you should also be taking one against cancer. And so just not eating refined whey protein. And then I will say this, eating some of those refined plant proteins, they get up to the same quality, they can have the same effect. You might need to have a little bit more, but they can have the same effect. And so like refined foods are refined foods.
Yeah. The bummer about, if you're like me and you don't know why whey is bad.
Yeah.
And, you go to the store and you see the plant-based protein, which is this big and costs $40, and then you see the whey protein, which is this big and costs $40, and this, the scoop in this one is double the protein the scoop in this one. Then to the average uneducated person, the choice of what to buy is simple because you're like, well, more protein, half the cost, double the volume. Why would I get the plant-based?
Yeah, and I do think you can get, because it's amino acids, that you can get ones that are the same size, protein per scoop, but they're not all going to be like that.
Right.
But it's economically, it's because whey is a byproduct of the dairy industry. Like there's no other purpose. They're actually found a market.
Cheaper.
Yeah. They actually found a market for like a waste product. more or less. And, and then the plant proteins are also a niche thing. So like if we had as many people going to shop for plant protein, it would lower the cost. If we had as many people as buying whey protein, it would lower the cost. And then if we had way less people buying whey protein, all of a sudden the whey protein would be twice as much as the plant protein. It's just like supply and demand, things like that, where it's harder. And that's why it's annoying, because of the way society is set up, it is harder to go vegan than it has to be. It could be even easier. In fact, I would venture to say that if we had like a vegan world where people were trying to eat meat, that would be way harder than people trying to be vegan in the current world. I mean, can you imagine, like, it's illegal to kill animals, everybody's vegan, like everybody is eating all these plant foods, and then someone's like, I want to go and kill this animal for like the first time in 100 years. Like that would be very interesting. It'd
be an interesting plot of a movie.
Yeah, it would be.
I mean, it'd probably be one that they would have. And also with the whey stuff, it's what everybody knows is the thing to do. I mean, every article you read in a bodybuilding magazine, unless you're following a plant-based coach, even the last coach that I had, who I kept saying to him, you can help me with my macros and my calories and whatever, but I don't really want advice on, what to eat, would always say to me, I just don't understand why you don't just throw in some scoops of whey. And it's just sort of like people say it, I think, as a reaction. One of the things, again, if we're going to talk hard science when it comes to the protein thing and inflammation, we have studies that show, so plant-based protein, no extra inflammation or less. Animal-based protein, more inflammation. It goes back to what we were saying earlier of what did the species evolve to eat? Because the body recognizes foreign proteins as invaders. And so it mounts an inflammation response on purpose in case the body's being invaded. So one of the things that happens sometimes when women have more than one baby is that with the first baby, it doesn't matter what the blood type is because the body doesn't really know what's going on, and so, okay. But then for every other child, because the husband might have a different blood type, if the kid has a different blood type than the mother, as the cells are circulating, the mother's body can attack the baby. And so,
this particular blood type too is like AB negative or something negative.
Well, I mean, so it has to do with our, so blood types can be, A, B, O, AB, and then there's positive, negative, and all that. Yep. So if it's different than any of the protein markers, there are different things that they do. And so the doctors just notice it, they test for it, and then they sort of suppress a little bit. But so again, and this is a human thing. So we're not supposed to have extra human proteins floating around either. I think, again, it points like the size of the colon, like the canines, like the so. I mean, there's all this biology that seems at least to point more towards plant-based, even more so than omnivorous.
Yeah, and I actually want to continue answering your question along that exact vein of what other things could happen with whey protein is that we can have certain autoimmune reactions because these proteins look a lot like our own proteins in our body. And so, for example, type 1 diabetes, there's a lot of studies connecting, the casomorphin, that casein being digested in casomorphin, having a very similar sequence as a lot of the various cells in your body, one being the insulin-producing cells in your pancreas. And, they also think it might actually be cow's milk, insulin in cow's milk, which is gross, but there's even insulin in cow's milk. But just this idea that there are these proteins that can cross-react. So your immune system sees this foreign invader in your bloodstream, especially if you have some intestinal barrier issue. They kind of make a wanted poster of that protein sequence. And then when they see in your own body, they go, all right, arrest that guy, attack that guy, whatever. And so they end up attacking the beta cells in your pancreas, maybe for rheumatoid arthritis inside your joints and so forth. And so that's one where it's like, yeah, clearly we're not supposed to be eating that, especially like refined whey protein. I'm sure that's probably caused some havoc on people's autoimmune issues.
Yeah. But back to supplementation, I think, again, people have this view that there are so many nutrient deficiencies that you have to watch out for if you go on a plant-based diet. What's Mike the Vegan's take on that? On
a plant-based diet? Man, it's hard because there's also, like, some of them are just a result of, like, food quality right now and nutrients going down a bit. And, like, for example, iodine, like, you can get 50% of the iodine that you need from a certain potato grown in a certain soil and then no iodine in another one. It's like just annoying things like that. But obviously you can get iodine from plant foods, seaweed and stuff like that. One that came up lower was zinc, which is funny because a recent Swiss study found that there was no statistically significant difference for B12 deficiencies, which people are always freaking out. The iron levels were actually a little bit better in the vegans. Get that? So all these huge things, anemia is huge across the world. But then zinc, they did have a higher. And another one, I will say, folate deficiencies, folic acid deficiencies were 4 times higher in people that ate meat than vegans, because vegans are pounding down the greens and the legumes, and that's the leading cause of neural tube defects, which is the leading fetal birth defect. Yeah, is folic acid deficiency. But then the zinc was a little bit lower, and there's a question because these vegans aren't really necessarily manifesting any symptoms by having by having a higher rate of deficiency in that one area. Remember all those other areas I talked about, because people are going to be like, oh, vegans have low zinc, no one should ever go vegan. It's like, did you hear what I just said?
Right.
But that's one where it's two things, a few things. People's digestive systems, for example, if you have a good digestive system and you're used to eating things like phytates and various nutrients, you can absorb more zinc. Or if you cook the way we cook, like traditionally, we soak things, they get rid of those and you can absorb more zinc from the plants. Or if you actually cook whole grains with garlic or onions, it will make the zinc much more bioavailable, things like that. So if you make a few mistakes, or if you've had antibiotics recently, things like that, all of a sudden it's a little bit harder. But then we also have to ask, like, what is the level of zinc that we actually need? These people aren't getting taste issues or anything like that. And we don't even really know if zinc is a major issue in terms of widespread vegans. But it's like, that was the one thing vegans did a little worse on. And so it's like, why is that? And there's a few explanations, but so vegans should just eat some more pumpkin seeds and soak them.
Yeah, I think, again, for people that are sort of thinking about making a change, I think making sure you get enough calories and just keeping it simple and not sweating the small stuff so much in the beginning, because if you go down a YouTube rabbit hole, which I have done a million times and I still do, you can find yourself hearing Dr. Greger and some of the people talk about you need to chop the greens and let them sit on the
the broccoli needs to
for 45 minutes and then you cook it. And I mean, even me, my first thought is like, oh God,
too much micromanagement.
There's no way I'm gonna do that, And so again, we don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And then Greger will throw in, we'll just take some mustard powder or whatever and throw it on there, and then you can skip that whole step, and it's like, oh, that's good. But I think that's the thing, is that people get bogged down in the minutia, and a joke I've heard you make on your channel a lot of times that I think, again, is so important, because it brings up, it sort of takes, it's reductio ad absurdum, where it's like, well, I can't see myself soaking my beans, therefore I'll just not do it and eat all the animals I want, kill everything, and funny. Who cares? And I mean, it sort of becomes, it's beyond this slippery slope of like, whoa, does it have to be that it's that?
Yeah, well, people are looking for like the easiest little excuse. It's the same reason how like just some random dude spouting off some nonsense with no studies about how the Game Changers is wrong.
Yeah.
Like you don't need very good, compelling, high quality information to continue your same habits. It's a matter of changing your habits that you need way more, and a major sort of avalanche of inertia to push you into doing it.
Yeah. There's just so much, and it's so fun to talk to you, because you again, the majority of my interaction with you is watching your videos, and you're like responding back. It's really cool. You dropped something in there that I would love to ask you about. So what did you think of the last season of Game of Thrones?
I thought it was, how do I say this? People were harder on it than they should have been. Like these directors did 7 seasons of an amazing job. They do a pretty good job on the last one, and all of a sudden it's like they've ruined everything. It's like, wait, they actually made it happen. You know, they made this whole thing happen. So I think it's just people just like to kind of like hate, and they like to like mob mentality turn on people and just point fingers. And like, yeah, they could have done some things better. They could have just been more patient and waited until it was actually written by the person that originally wrote everything.
Yeah.
But, you know, they had all pressure from industry. Like ask yourself this. Could you have done a better job on the 8th season of Game of Thrones? Probably not.
Right.
There you go. So don't criticize.
Right. I mean, so I really liked it. And the thing is, by the time I saw it, people had just pissed and moaned about it so much that I was expecting it to be terrible. It was good.
Your expectations were in the gutter.
There were some things I didn't like, but I thought the ending was good. I mean, I really liked it. And, you know, I loved, there was a wonderful line.
Are you about to give us spoilers?
No, so I was just thinking, I better not give any spoilers. But there
Dumbledore dies.
But right. Listen, if you don't know by now that Dumbledore dies, like there comes the thing, we used to say in medical school, if it's been on DVD more than 6 months, we can talk about it.
Yeah.
Because if you haven't watched it, you clearly haven't. It's not a priority.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I mean, so the only spoiler I guess I can give is that Tyrion's alive at the end. But like Tyrion has a great line at the end of the last episode where he's talking about kind of what has happened and like what the power structure is going to be and how, you know, this one group's going to do here. And he says nobody's happy, so it's a pretty good compromise. And I thought to myself, like, that's, as somebody who's done a lot of therapy with patients and is negotiating with, you know, that's actually I really love that line. That was one of my favorite lines in the whole series, and I don't know. I just thought I really enjoyed it. Since you dropped it in there, I rarely can find people that'll talk about it with me, and I don't know. I just thought, well, you know, we're always talking about food and animal agriculture and whatever. I wonder if the fans would like to know. But besides Game of Thrones, like, what are some other sort of cultural things that you like?
I watch Walking Out show. You're not talking about shows. I was gonna say,
no, whatever you can.
I watched The Walking Dead. Okay. Like, I'm up to date on that. I really like the guy who plays Daryl in that is vegan. There's multiple vegans in that show too, actually. What other shows do we watch? I'm about to start watching The Mandalorian, which I'm stoked about because I've heard good things about it. What else do I watch a lot? Oh, Sabrina the Teenage Witch.
Sabrina the Teenage Witch, excellent.
The new ones.
What kind of music are you into?
I've actually had bands in the past. Like, I've been the lead singer of a rock band, like an indie rock band.
Are there any videos of that online?
Probably, yeah.
There are.
Yeah, there's only like one, I think, maybe that's posted right now.
I was gonna say, we'll try to find that and link it down below for those of you Mike the Vegan fans that want to.
What's the name of the band?
You can look it up. It's the Fever Tones. We just were together for a while, and then we have one song that I think was filmed live.
The Fever Tones?
You're probably not going to be able to find it.
Well,
anyway, we can worry about that later.
No. I mean, it's just I think again, like it's nice for people to know sort of, you know, more round perspective, because obviously your channel has a niche and you're really good at it. You're really passionate about it.
Thank you.
You know, but it's always kind of fun to know some other things about people. You're currently getting your master's degree. Do you consider yourself, is vegan YouTubing your full-time job? I mean, what's your sort of long-term career plan? Because you're in your, late 20s?
Yeah, thankfully, yeah, I am.
I was going to say, Lindy's laughing. Is that not right? Like,
I'm about to turn 30.
Oh, okay. Well, hey, happy birthday, Santa.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I do a lot. Sorry, I got really distracted. Repeat the question.
What's your career path? I mean,
just in general. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, are you a full-time YouTuber? Is that your main job?
Okay. Yeah.
And then like, what do you see your career as being? With your masters?
Well, right now I do at the very least, like I try to have several full days of YouTube a week. But there's a lot of also just like administrative stuff that I have to do for the YouTube channel too, or research stuff throughout the week. But I'm also doing the Masters in Public Health, also building a tiny house. Like, I would like to be putting a little bit more time into YouTube right now, but the tiny house needs to be built. And so there's things like that. And I have at least like probably another year for my Masters in Public Health because I'm doing it part-time. It's mostly done, about half done now. And so I don't really know. YouTube, people always ask me, like, what if people stop watching? Or like, what if YouTube stops becoming a thing? And I'm like, I don't know. I'll just have to figure it out step by step. So I haven't thought that far ahead.
And with your master's degree, do you want to get a PhD and be a professor? Do you think you want to write stuff? Do you want to do research?
I have not thought far ahead to the PhD. Some people have been like, you need to get a PhD. You should do it. But part of the reason I did a master's in public health was so that I could at least get involved more in research and learn more about research. And at least so I could be at a place where I could talk about it from a more professional aspect. But then also maybe, you know, if I write a book, then I'll have more of like a platform to talk from when I'm having a master in public health. Or there are also studies that I feel like need to be done. Like, for example, if these studies by Esselstyn are fully valid, which I believe they are, then is there a way that we can get the National Institute of Health to fund like a massive trial with pulling out all of the stops on massive control groups and randomization and full scans that are, you know, very expensive to do, and long term, like trying to make things like that happen, because we're talking about our leading killer being reversible and just not even pouring even a fraction of 1% of humanity's funding into fighting our leading cause of death with the best, what looks like to be the best chance we have of beating it. Like what?
It does, but to battle the lobbies that you're talking about,
sure.
to get
I know.
that through NIH, I mean, I have to say, I don't think he's going to be the nominee. Cory Booker is a vegan, and they asked him about it on TV, and he shit the bed. I mean, it was like, so first of all, Cory Booker kept doing this in all the debates anyway with the big eyes. I mean, it was like, what about your being vegan? It's like, I don't think people have to be vegan. Or I was like, oh.
He's just like, this is my weak spot. This is my weak spot. Don't blow this. Don't blow this. Oh, vegans suck.
Right. I mean, you
might as well shout it.
I just kept hearing. I could hear sort of the force. I could hear the voices of the force of like the vegan people throughout the world being like, "No, you just got a question on national TV, and you totally dropped the ball on that." But I think that it's one of those things. It's that shtick that politicians have to have. Like, I'm at the state. We live in Iowa. I'm at the state fair. Look at me eat a bacon wrapped piece of butter. I'm just like you. You should totally vote.
For one of the major Democratic events was like at the fair. It was like a pig roast or something. It was a steak something.
But so there's always the steak fry and the pig roast and the whatever else. And I've often thought to myself, for a variety, there's so many reasons why I could never run. The stuff that would get said about me, it would just be horrific. But is that whether I was plant-based or not, there'd be enough crap that I wouldn't want to have to do that they'd be like, no, you have to. Like, and it just feels like pandering. Like, it would have been really interesting had Cory Booker or any of them given sort of a better answer that wouldn't have to
offend anyone.
Yeah, but at the same time, the lobby is so powerful. So, you mean the NIH why isn't the NIH funded? It's not being called for in great numbers, and the funding sources with the lobbying from the dairy industry and the beef industry and so forth. I mean, I always say this, and people always think I'm kidding. I would love to be the Surgeon General, and I'm not kidding. And I would
actually get some shit done.
Well, I mean, I would focus. There's never been a psychiatrist who is the Surgeon General, and I would focus on diet very heavily. I would try to bring in all voices, but it would be a lot of plant-based. I mean, I'd have Gregor in DC in 5 seconds, and be like, listen, you're probably the best at this, and I'd have Davis and Barnhart and so forth, and I'd say, listen, we have to market this a little bit better, but what can we really do? And then I'd get fired in a month, but I could still call myself a former Surgeon General.
And you'd be what they're eating at the next steak fry.
And maybe sit on a board or something. But I mean, I think like you say, these leading killers, they don't get any press. And we were taught in medical school, and I've been out of medical school 10 years ago. Right now, I was in medical school. We were taught there's nothing you can do. I mean, you can manage it, but there's not anything you can do. And all those stories people hear about after a heart attack, they're like, go home and eat some meat because you deserve it. And it's like, what? It's
weird.
I find myself flabbergasted, and yet, I do think it's hard for a lot of people, and that's why I'm sort of on the if it takes you a while to transition, I think that's okay. And I think people slip up, and they to beat themselves up too hard. If it becomes, back to what we said earlier, if it becomes so dogmatic that it's like, if I find myself halfway through something and, oh my God, they didn't take the cheese off it, and now I'm a horrible person and I have to break up with my fiance or whoever because this is hard. I don't know, like I feel like that's so harsh that it scares people away.
Yeah, and I would say probably the most frustrating part about this is just how much it could help people and how their own weird biases and ego is getting in the way. Like, there are dudes out there who are probably cussing out vegans on the internet, literally typing a comment right now about how much vegans suck, and they probably can't even get an erection because their dick artery is clogged. And it's amazing how many people have come up to me and just been like, hey, I had erectile dysfunction until I changed my diet, like young dudes. At festivals and stuff.
Hey, Mike, my dick is doing really well.
Good. That's actually why I'm here. This is official checkup. We're done though. So
one of the best parts of Game Changers, whether you think it's propaganda or not, was the dick part.
Oh yeah, that was just so funny. It's hilarious.
Oh, it was hysterical. It was hysterical. Well. So I'm gonna admit this on camera in front of you, just because like I guess I don't know if it's ashamed or whatever, but I'm gonna say this: you were completely right about something we talked about one time, and I'm gonna confess. Remember, I want to get your approval, but no, but something that you said that really affected my life. So you and I, the last time we hung out and we had lunch.
So curious right now.
Yeah. No. because I'm going to say you did something completely right? But we were talking about sort of the slippery slope and how it's better to just be 100% plant-based because it can sort of sneak in. Like if
the dam breaks and all of a sudden
one little thing and it becomes this and becomes that. And I went home and I told my wife that we had talked about that. And I was sort of saying, I understand Mike's position, but I'm still kind of on this thing about whatever else. And so, I was sort of, after I won the bodybuilding show, I was powerlifting and I was gaining muscle and I was up and up and up and up. And then it began with a non-vegan protein bar. And I'm not blaming her. I swear to God, I'm not blaming her. My physician is a vegetarian. Yeah. And every time I see her, she's like, I don't understand why you don't eat eggs. I don't understand this and what. You should just have a Quest bar because they're so good and they're so amazing, whatever else. And I kind of found myself I didn't have anything else in the office, which was a mistake. And I was like, you know what?
Always when it happens, when your calories are low.
This is going to be fine. And so I ate the Quest bar. And the funny thing is, and this is going to sound so grandiose, I don't know what I expected to happen, but nothing happened. The earth didn't come shattering down, and I didn't get called by the vegan police, and it really began that simply. And I found myself sort of okay, so that went okay, and these are pretty good. So it was only the protein bars. Yeah. And then it was like, well, what about this? And then I got really, really injured. And so, you're too polite to say it, but I mean, I put on some weight, and so as of 2 or 3 weeks ago, I'm back sort of full whole food plant-based, back in the gym trying to get built back up. But I slipped, man. Yeah. I did. And it was just like you predicted. And so I sort of, it became this, it became that, it became these old friends, these old enemies came back in. It's like, well, you haven't had this for a while. What about real cheese on that? What about this? And I found myself sort of in this place. And my wife said, so just like Mike the Vegan said, she did. And
I'm getting in there in your marriage, man.
Right, totally. And it was funny because when she said that, I thought to myself, he did say that, and it was exactly what Mike said would happen. It started so innocuously. It was sort of one thing became just
one little bump.
Yeah. Well, no.
One little bump of Coke.
Yeah, right. I mean,
pretty soon you're on the corner.
It was funny.
Begging for lines of whey protein.
Yeah, right. What lines of whey protein? Just the peanut butter, man. They rub it on my gums. It's so good. But.
It's funny because I think what happens to people is a psychological burnout where it's actually easier to just not do the thing that's better for you or better for the world in any situation. It's easier to just not drive an inefficient car or just use as much water or energy as you want, and it's just so easy to just get in that habit. And then so you're breaking the dam with diet, especially and when you have everybody pushing you in that direction too, all this food, the whole society is built around these foods, then it's super easy. And so you gotta watch that dam, and that's why I'm just full vegan.
Well, and I keep saying this to everyone I tell this story to because I want to be really clear. I'm not blaming anybody else. The decision was absolutely mine. But once I kind of began to slip a little bit, I got positive reinforcement. So my mom started saying to me, it's so much nicer because now at holidays, I'm not all freaked out.
Oh, look at that. Now you're not loved unless
and my
you're
wife
not
started
vegan.
saying, it's so much better to go to a restaurant with you now because you're not playing 20 questions with the waiter every time. And then I feel like this is so grandiose, but I found myself observing myself because I felt the wheels begin to fall off. And part of it was I was out of the gym, I was hurt, I couldn't work out. But man, my mental health began to decline a little bit, and I felt like shit, and I was not sort of functioning at the same levels and I knew what I needed to do. But I felt like the farther down the rabbit hole I went, I was just man. So I kind of had to, pull myself out of it and kind of suck it back up. But that's why I have a lot of empathy for people. I think that, for whatever reason, like you say, you get burnout, it becomes one thing, and you think, well, that wasn't so bad. But I will finish this little story of me humiliating myself, but also being honest by saying, here I was moving. For me, at the time, I'm 41 now, but I was 40 at the time. For a 40-year-old guy who hadn't been lifting a lot, I was moving quite a bit of weight. I saw no benefit incorporating non-vegan protein bars or non-vegan foods. It's not oh my God, my weight's jumped up so much. And if anything, I wasn't recovering as fast, which you'll hear in the movies like The Game Changers people talk about.
Yep.
And I really feel like I saw my performance decline. And so it was sort of like, because I hadn't had that experience when we began the movie and I became vegan and began lifting.
You had only tried it with plant-based.
Right, like I wasn't like I was a lifter in high school.
So you didn't have your A versus B.
Right. And so I kind of went with it for longer than I should have, so to speak. So I'm not asking you to sort of like bless my slip, but I wanted to. I've actually wanted to tell you for a while, but I couldn't.
I just didn't know how to break it.
Well, exactly. I wasn't going to drop you an email and be like, hey, guess what?
I do think it's funny you say about the protein, because I am 20 to 25 pounds heavier than I ever was when I was taking whey protein and like trying to work out when I was younger. And it's like, I'm just a normal dude. I'm not even like a bodybuilder, weightlifter, or anything. Like I'm not claiming to be buff or anything. Yeah. But I was literally 20 pounds heavier eating all of these animal proteins, which are supposed to be so amazing. So what happened there? And no, it's protein is protein. Like that study said, it's about how much you're taking in, not whether it's animal versus plant protein.
Yeah. So anyway, I'm about 3 weeks back on it. My weights are going up at the gym. I'm losing weight again. And I'm actually thinking about competing in Austin again. Yeah. Just to, just sort of do it again and get back on track and all that. So that's my thing, man.
That's great. And then I will say, and imagine being somebody who's bullied regularly for being vegan, as opposed to somebody who's just, it seems like I was just a little bit more of an inconvenience when I was vegan. And so that's pressure. Imagine people who, they go to school, or their parents or somebody is calling them names, giving them crap, trying to secretly feed them non-vegan food and all that stuff. Like people have it hard because of the way that society is right now, which is unfortunate. I mean, and it's the same way. Like I'm not trying to compare things directly or equate things directly, but to compare them, with things like slavery and like open racism. Like if you were anti-slavery in certain areas, like you were the bad guy, And it's like, so if you're trying to be anti-animal harm, like you can be the bad guy, and it's like it's harder to swim upstream. Yeah. Like that's just obvious. Even if there's something better upstream, it's easier to just go downstream. Right.
I do think there'll be a time in history, much like we look back on a variety of things. My favorite being the cigarette industry. The tobacco industry denying all these things, and then they kind of went into the food industry, and then I think there will be a time that people look back, but it's like you say, to swim upstream, and as we're talking about the whole time, it's getting easier, it's getting more mainstream, it's less of a trigger. I think people to say that they're plant-based or they're vegetarian or vegan. I think it's getting there, but at the same time, when you're right in that sticking place, it can be scary. It's almost like coming out. People have to come out to their families as I'm going to be vegan. And
I've actually heard gay people say it was easier to come out as somebody who's gay than somebody who's vegan. Yeah. But I doubt that. I mean, maybe most people don't have that opinion, but there was a person out there that has it the same.
Right. Well, I mean, different for everybody, but still. So
different for everybody, exactly.
So we're getting close on 2 hours, which is about when we wrap up. I always like to sort of give you a chance to sort of pitch where people can find you. What are some things that you want to talk about? Also, it is conversation with interesting people, and we always try to say to guests, if they're interesting people that that we'd love to know about them, and so we can talk about it afterwards, obviously. But to like have people on. I've been trying to find. I got to meet her for the movie, but Emily, the Bite-Sized Vegan. I've been trying.
She lives right up here.
She lives around here, and like I've been trying on her website and on her. I can't seem to find her, but she's really awesome, and I'd love to talk to her. Not just because of the plant-based thing, because again, what I said, like I would love to talk to somebody who honestly thinks that the carnivore diet is great or whatever, just to sort of have the discussion. But if you know anybody, as time goes along, we'd love to have them on, and we'll give them a platform too. So where can people find you? What are, and anything coming up that you want to pitch or anything like that? The mic's yours.
Most things is whatever the website is /MikeTheVegan, MIC like a microphone, not like MIKE, my name. And so Facebook /MikeTheVegan, Instagram /MikeTheVegan. But obviously my main one is youtube.com /MikeTheVegan, and things I have coming up. I'm just trying to come out with a video every week.
Sure.
I mean, that's pretty much.
And like I said, we'll have everything sort of linked there below. You go around and you get to speak at VegFest and you travel a lot. Are you going to anything anytime soon?
I have one. I'm pretty sure I'm going to be in New York City in May.
That's cool.
Everything works out for that. So I kind of tone it down toward the winter. We went to the UK, we went to Hawaii, we went to LA this year, and it's just like, okay,
given your prominence in the community and given the success of your YouTube channel, do you get a lot of offers and you say no a bunch? I mean, do you sort of take, kind of what comes along?
I've had to start saying no more because a lot of people are just like, hey, we'll offer you basically nothing to come, or 1/5 of how much it would cost me to literally go, even without being like frivolous, just go there and stay. and just like eat food and travel. Like,
right,
yeah.
right. When you told me once the same thing about sponsors, which is that except for Thrive Market, that you've been approached a bunch, but either the finances wouldn't make sense or it didn't make sense to be like, climate change is bad, buy this bar.
Or buy this knife that's made in China. I have worked with a few other, like, I've done little things for, like, there's another online marketplace called Milk Guys, MYLK Guys, and they're all vegan. I also work with Wuxley, and here I have my Wuxley thing.
Yeah, I saw the video about that.
Yeah. And I'm about to do another mention in the video. Like, things like that. I reached out to them, and almost every day I get some weird email from some other company. Some of them are great, but some of them, like, maybe it's a protein powder company, and I'm just like, I advocate against taking protein powders, so it would just not be right for me to sell that. And I try to do like 1 in 10 videos. A lot of people, most of these platforms have sponsorships, like podcasts, a lot of times, every single video usually. And so I'm just trying to keep it demonetized. I have my Patreon, which is great, and things like that.
We'll link that below too. One of the coolest things I saw, I think it was on your Instagram, is that you got an advanced copy of Dr. Gregor's book.
Yeah. And you're the one that gets it next. You want it next, right?
Oh, I didn't say that, but I would love that actually. But so that'd be cool.
It's really long though, so
right. Well, his first one's not short by any means, but for those of you that we've mentioned Michael Greger before, I think nutritionfacts.org is probably the best website on the internet, and his videos are almost all of them are free. I actually bought a few recently, just because there were a few that
I didn't even know you could buy.
Yeah. So you can buy he calls them webinars, but it's just his videos that you can pay some money and you get a whole bunch of them he hasn't released yet. So I'm really interested in intermittent fasting, and we don't really have time, unless we want to go an extra however long to talk about intermittent fasting. But I think the science is very interesting, and I've read a bunch. So Dr. Jason Fung, who is definitely a meat guy, he's kind of thought of as being like the intermittent fasting and the fasting guru. Yeah. He's a nephrologist, so a kidney doctor, and talks a lot about it. But so Greger has a series of videos now. They've been coming out free recently, but I'm ahead because he'll say, and we'll do that next. Yeah. Right. So I'm 6 or 7 ahead because I paid a little bit. But anyway, most of the stuff is free. I send patients all the time. You can type anything into the search bar. Greger does it really well because they're like 5 minutes, maybe 6 or 7. They're very digestible. He's very entertaining. But anyway, his first book was called How Not to Die. And then in December will come out How Not to Diet, which is the next one. And he's been on sort of the plant-based shows, pitching it and saying, here's some of the cool things that are in it. So I thought that was cool that you
he's awesome.
Kind of do stuff with Greger. He mentions in his thing, I said this, I got to speak at a thing recently, and I, again, very arrogantly threw this out there, but he says he has all these plans to write books out for the next 20 years. And one of them that he talks about is going to be, I think by the end of 2030, is going to be a mental health one.
Oh,
and I would love to be involved in that. I really would. I mean, even if it's just like I don't get him coffee while he's writing. I just think it'd be cool to work with Greger. And plant-based mental health is obviously something I'm interested in because that's what I do for a living. I do mental health stuff and all that. You told me at one point with your master's you were interested in sort of mental health stuff maybe. So
just seeing how things like serotonin levels and dopamine levels change when you have like a balanced whole carb intake and like taking away that arachidonic acid and stuff in the animal products. That's a whole nother topic. But one thing I wanted to say about Greger, which is funny, is that Greger has a lot of detractors, obviously the high meat people and the carnivore people, and they can never find any actual information to criticize him on. So all they do is they just criticize that he's not buff. They're like, he's not buff. You wouldn't you don't want to be not buff like Dr. Greger, right? It's like the most like, it's so like, I don't even want such a primitive argument against somebody's information.
He's just such a ninja. I heard him on a really bro bodybuilding podcast where they were kept talking about, in the middle of the night when I go to the bathroom, I eat these protein chips because I don't want to get catabolic. I want to get catabolic in the middle of the night. And Greger came. That's the only reason I listened because Greger was on there. And again, they were throwing bro and nonsense at him, and he did what I said earlier in the show. He would go, okay, well let's think about that for a second. I mean, does it make sense if we look at the people that live the longest in the world at the blue zones and so forth? Like,
do they wake up in the middle of the night and have a Quest bar
and eat blah blah keto protein chips in the middle of the night because they don't want to get catabolic in the middle of the night, bro?
That's so
but
ridiculous. Anyway,
man. So thank you so much for coming on. It's such a pleasure. I'm looking forward to when we do it again, and I always like. texting you and emailing you. I feel like I probably bug you a lot, but I'll see articles and I'll think, probably 97 people have already sent this to Mike.
No, it's good. Yeah, you're one of the oftentimes 4 or 5 people that have right away mentioned something that I start making a video about. So
yeah, but I don't want to miss anything. And also you and I went up having these good conversations. So
for sure.
It's a pleasure to be your friend. Thanks for coming on. And anybody else listening, we're always looking for suggestions for interesting people that you would like to hear from, or topics that you're thinking about. We'll find an expert. I'm a bulldog about tracking people down and enticing them to come to my studio. So thanks a lot, Mike, and
thanks.
we'll see everybody next time.
My pleasure. Let's get some food.